يحفظ البيئة ويمنح الأجيال القادمة فرصاً أفضل.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أسعد الله أوقاتكم جميعا بكل خير، وأجمل الأماني وأصدقها بنجاح أعمال الاجتماع البرلماني بمناسبة الدورة 38 والعشرين لمؤتمر الأمم المتحدة بنجاح أعمال الاجتماع البرلماني بمناسبة الدورة 38 والعشرين لمؤتمر الأمم المتحدة بنجاح أعمال الاجتماع البرلماني بمناسبة الدورة 38 والعشرين لمؤتمر الأمم المتحدة بنجاح أعمال الاجتماع البرلماني بمناسبة الدورة 38 والعشرين لمؤتمر الأمم المتحدة بنجاح أعمال الاجتماع البرلماني بمناسبة الدورة 38 والعشرين لمؤتمر الأمم المتحدة بنجاحه القصوى في الإسهام ببلورة الوعي وتشكيل الرأي العام تجاه قضايا الكوكب البيئية، ويرسم دورا أوضح لأدوات العمل البرلماني في إرساء دعائم بنية تشريعية ورقابية صلبة تأخذ العمل المناخي إلى آفاق أبعد يكون فيها القول الفصل للإنجازات البيئية على الأرض. اجتماعكم اليوم هو من الأهمية بمكان أن جميع الأنظار متجهة لمخرجاته، فالبرلمانات مناط بها اليوم دور الحارس المؤتمن والرقيب على تطبيق الحكومات للسياسات البيئية وقياس مدى الإنجاز على الأرض في مسيرة الحياد المناخي التي التزمت دول العالم وحكوماتها المختلفة بالوصول إليها خلال العقدين القادمين. أترك الحديث عن دور البرلمانات في الشأن البيئي إلى معالي صقر غباش رئيس المجلس الوطني الاتحادي في دولة الإمارات ليأخذنا في رحلة بيئية بعيون برلمانية، فليتفضل وكلنا شكر لمعاليه.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أصحاب المعالي رؤساء البرلمانات الصديقة، سعادة مارتن تشونغ وونغ أمين عام الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، أصحاب السعادة رؤساء وأعضاء الوفود المشاركة، السادة الحضور، السيدات والسادة، سعادة السفير ماجد السويدي المدير العام لمكتب مؤتمر الأطراف COP 28، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إنه لمن دواعي سروري أن أرحب بكم على أرض دولة الإمارات، والتي مثلما عرفتموها وطناً وملتقاً للتعايش والتسامح والسلام، فإنها اليوم تستضيفكم وهي تحمل معكم ومن أجل الكوكب والإنسان رسالة الدفاع عن الأرض واستدامة ازدهار بيئتها وطبيعتها. ويطيب لي بهذه المناسبة أن أتوجه بأصدق عبارات الشكر والتقدير لشريكنا في تنظيم هذا المؤتمر، الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، مقرونة بأسمى عبارات الامتنان لرئاسة كوب 28 وفريق دولة الإمارات لتغير المناخ الذي لم يدخر وسعا لتسهيل عقد مؤتمرنا ضمن فعاليات كوب، وذلك لأول مرة في تاريخ مؤتمرات كوب، مع ما يعكسه ذلك من إدراك للدور المهم للبرلمانيين وتقاسم للمسؤولية بين مؤسساتنا الوطنية التنفيذية والتشريعية وصولاً إلى النتائج المثمرة التي عقدنا العزم جميعاً على تحقيقها. السادة الحضور، أود في مستهل كلمتي أن أبارك للإنسانية جمعاء ما تمخض عنه مؤتمر الأطراف الحالي من نتائج عملية منذ أول يوم لانطلاقته، ولعل أهمها هو إعلان صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان رئيس الدولة حفظه الله عن تأسيس صندوق الحلول المناخية بمبلغ 30 مليار دولار، وكذلك تفعيل صندوق الخسائر والأضرار لمساعدة الدول الفقيرة والنامية لمواجهة تداعيات تغير المناخ. فهذا الإنجاز هو نصر للإنسانية ولكوكب الأرض على حد سواء، وهو انتصار لمعنى تقاسم المسؤولية بين دول وشعوب العالم. سادة الحضور، دعوني أنقل لكم عبارة موجزة وبليغة وصف بها صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان رئيس الدولة حفظه الله تداعيات ظاهرة التغير المناخي، وحدد فيها ما علينا فعله بقوله: إنه لوقت حرج لكوكبنا، فعالمنا يواجه العديد من التحديات، ومن أهمها تغير المناخ الذي أصبح يؤثر على الاستقرار والأمن في العالم. وبما أننا لا نملك إلا أرضاً واحدة، فمن الضروري أن نوحد جهودنا لمعالجة هذا التحدي من خلال النظر إليه باعتباره فرصة للابتكار وإيجاد الحلول وتنويع الاقتصاد. لقد شكلت قضية تغير المناخ منذ تأسيس دولة الإمارات عام 1971 أولوية كبرى في سياسات الدولة وتوجهات قيادتها الرشيدة، من خلال اعتماد مسارين متوازيين: أولهما التوجه نحو الاستثمار في مصادر الطاقة النظيفة والمتجددة وتطوير البنية التحتية اللازمة لتحقيق الحياد الكربوني، وثانيهما توفير أطر تشريعية سليمة وشفافة تنظم عملية التحول نحو التنمية المستدامة بكل قطاعاتها الاقتصادية والاجتماعية والبيئية. ومن أجل هذا كانت الإمارات أول دولة في المنطقة تصادق على اتفاق باريس للمناخ عام 2015، وأول دولة في الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا تضع لنفسها هدف تحقيق الحياد المناخي بحلول عام 2050 من خلال اعتمادها استراتيجية الإمارات للطاقة 2050 باستثمارات تصل إلى 600 مليار درهم بهدف تحقيق التوازن بين التنمية المستدامة والحفاظ على البيئة. يضاف إلى ذلك أن رؤية دولة الإمارات المناخية قد اعتمدت منهجية متميزة تقوم على مبدأ الشراكة المتكاملة في التصدي لظاهرة تغير المناخ ومعالجة تداعياته، منهجية تتضمن مشاركة مؤسسات السياسة والتشريع والاقتصاد والتكنولوجيا والإعلام وحتى الأديان في تحديد مسؤولياتها وكيفية تكاملها مع بعضها البعض للتعامل مع هذه القضية. وهذا ما تجلى في استضافة العاصمة أبو ظبي للقمة العالمية لقادة الأديان من أجل المناخ بتاريخ 6 و7 نوفمبر عام 2023 لتأكيد أهمية دور قادة الأديان ورموزه ومساهمتهم في دعم سياسات واستراتيجيات مواجهة تغير المناخ وفي تحقيق العدالة المناخية. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السادة الحضور، من هذا المنطلق فإنني أود التأكيد على مجموعة من الحقائق ذات الصلة بهذه الظاهرة، والتي تستوجب التوقف عندها لنتمكن من التوصل إلى رأي مشترك حيالها، ألا وهي: أولاً، لقد اقترن تقدم الإنسان في العصر الحديث وللأسف الشديد بمحاولته السيطرة على الطبيعة ومواردها، وعليه فإننا اليوم بحاجة لمراجعة شفافة وشاملة لبيان أن التقدم العلمي والصناعي والتكنولوجي لا يجب أن يكون على حساب سلامة الطبيعة والبيئة واستدامتها. لهذا فإننا مطالبون بإرساء علاقة تبادلية عادلة ورحيمة وودية بيننا وبين الطبيعة والبيئة. ثانياً، إننا اليوم شعوباً ودولاً الأمناء على البيئة والطبيعة ومواردهما قد ورثناها عن أجيالنا السابقة، وعليه فإن كل الخيارات التي نتخذها الآن ستحدد نوع وجودة ومقدار الإرث الذي سنتركه لأبنائنا وأحفادنا. وبالتالي فإننا مطالبون كبرلمانيين بالعمل مع حكوماتنا ومؤسساتنا الوطنية التنفيذية من أجل سن تشريعات مناخية ملزمة تحدد أهدافاً واضحة وطموحة في إطار زمني مناسب لخفض الانبعاثات والاستثمار في مشاريع التنمية المستدامة. ثالثاً، إن كثيراً من الدول النامية والفقيرة تتحمل اليوم أعباء وتكاليف تداعيات تغير المناخ بمقدار أكبر بكثير من مقدار مساهمتها فيه، الأمر الذي يفرض على الدول المتقدمة تقديم المساعدة المادية والتكنولوجية للدول النامية والفقيرة من أجل أن يتقاسم الجميع أعباء التصدي لظاهرة التغير المناخي، ومن أجل أن يكون التحول إلى مصادر الطاقة النظيفة عادلاً للجميع، ومن أجل أن ينعم الجميع بالأمن والأمان والاستقرار والسلام. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الحضور الكرام، أرحب بكم مرة ثانية في بلدكم الإمارات، وأتمنى لمؤتمرنا التوفيق والنجاح، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الشكر موصول لمعالي صقر غباش على إضاءاته البرلمانية البيئية. ونستكمل معكم هذه الرحلة المعرفية مع معالي مارتن شون كونغ الأمين العام للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، ليأخذ بدوره مهمة تسليط الضوء على مساحات التداخل بين العمل البرلماني والشأن البيئي والمعمول والمأمول، المعمول به على الأرض والمأمول به مستقبلا على صعيد التشريعات البيئية. فليتفضل مشكورا.
Your Excellency, the Right Honourable Speaker of the Federal National Council of the UAE, thank you very much for being such a gracious host. I wish to recognize the presence of several speakers of Parliament here at this very important meeting, as well as other very prominent members of Parliament. And also, I recognize the presence of the Director General of COP28, as well as the representative of the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, the newly elected President of the IPU, Dr. Tulia Axon, would have been here today with us. Unfortunately, she has not been able to come because in the meantime, there is a natural disaster in her country, and she's had to stay back to address the challenges that have ensued. She sends her best wishes, but as we meet here, what is happening in Tanzania today, indeed in many other parts of the world, is testimony to the crisis and emergency that we, as the global community, are facing today: climate change. It therefore brings us to face these challenges that are coming with the emergency, and it is compelling for us to act now. I was reassured by what His Excellency, the Speaker of the FNC, said in his opening remarks. And let me use this opportunity on behalf of the Inter-Parliamentary Union to thank our gracious hosts, the United Arab Emirates. We salute the inclusive, consultative process that they have adopted in organizing this COP28. And I also want to hail the achievements made by the UAE in implementation of the provisions of the Paris Agreement, being a front runner in the global action to stem the tide of climate change. Thank you also, Mr. Speaker, with your team for the strong support that we have received from you as we jointly prepared for this very important meeting, which for the first time is taking place in the very heart of the COP conference. Usually it has been a side event taking place somewhere in a remote location, but because of the strong insistence of our host, the FNC, this year we are meeting where the action is. And I believe that the impact of our meeting today will resonate very well in high-level circles. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, you and your colleagues, for putting us in a very auspicious and conducive environment for very fruitful discussions. And I believe the efforts you have made are commensurate with the urgency and the compelling nature of the issue that is at stake. And I think we all are agreed, I think you mentioned it, that the pressing climate challenges that the global community is facing at this particular moment places a special burden on the parliamentary community, on parliamentarians. Many of you sitting here, you have the immense responsibility to take action, to take decisions that resonate beyond your national boundaries. As has been said time and again, climate change knows no borders. Climate change does not have a national passport. It does not ask you for permission to happen upon you. And so we have to be alert at all times. And it is therefore for this reason that we do recognize the importance of parliaments as going just beyond the traditional functions of Parliament. The Honourable Speaker did talk about the need for legislative and policy measures to implement the provisions of international commitments. But I think that we can say comfortably that as leaders, parliamentarians must embody the principles that they espouse. They have to preach by example. They have to enact measures that promote sustainability, both as individuals as well as collective institutions. This is very important for the impact that we want to really achieve. Therefore, I use this opportunity to highlight the campaign that the Inter-Parliamentary Union launched this year. This is our climate change year. Parliaments for the planet. Parliaments need to be at the forefront of the global drive to fight climate. And it is an instrument that has been designed, and I want to recognize the support we receive from the Arizona State University Julian Wrigley Global Futures Lab. They have provided strong support for this campaign, which is intended to help parliaments contribute in a robust way to the implementation of the climate action that is effective. We want to use this campaign as a way of compelling parliaments to follow the implementation of commitments that their governments have undertaken when it comes to climate change. I also want to send out a message of hope and a wish here that our deliberations on adaptation, on loss and damage, and on parliamentary oversight of the Paris Agreement and COP28 outcomes are driven by shared commitment, by shared sense of urgency and compassion. You did say that, Mr. Speaker. Compassion for nations and people who are on the front lines of climate change. The differential impacts of climate change exacerbate existing inequalities and pose severe threats to the lives and livelihoods of vulnerable and marginalized societies. Earlier this year, in October, at its assembly in Luanda, Angola, the IPU did award the MP of the Year prize to an outstanding champion of climate action, the Speaker of the Parliament of Tuvalu. And it is in recognition of the compelling nature of the crisis and the severe impact of climate change on a small island, vulnerable country that the IPU wanted to extend its hand of solidarity to the vulnerable communities. So I would like to say that it is important, it is imperative for parliaments to uphold their duty, to monitor and drive the effective implementation of commitments undertaken on the global stage. At the end of the day, the discussions that we have at these global gatherings, this discussion makes no sense if these are not translated into concrete action at national level. That is where it matters. How can we use the innovative ideas that we generate during these encounters, the commitments undertaken, the pledges? How can we use this to make a difference in the lives of the constituents that parliamentarians and parliaments represent across the world? We are therefore happy that we have this opportunity to have a good discussion and contribute the parliamentary perspective to the global discussion on climate change. And I think that we are not venturing into barren or infertile ground. A lot has been done, a lot has been achieved, but we have to be lucid enough to recognize that progress falls far short of expectations, which means that we need to do more. We have to be more robust in our action to drive progress in the implementation of climate change. Implementation of climate action, sorry. I want us, I would like, and I think I speak for the President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, I want to hope for us to come out of these deliberations rededicating ourselves to the commitment that has been made, that was made in Paris, to bring global warming to 1.25% of pre-industrial levels. There is no room for backsliding on this pledge. If we do backslide, it is the future generations that are going to bear the brunt of inaction. And I want to salute the presence of women parliamentarians here. I want to salute the presence of young MPs. I saw the president of the IPU Forum of Young Parliamentarians somewhere, Dan Carden. Hello, Dan, how are you? We look forward to your innovative discussions and ideas on how, together as a parliamentary community, and singularly a parliamentary community, how we can move forward when it comes to addressing the, I would say, the scourge of climate change. So with those words, I just want to express the hope that we will find today's deliberations very fulfilling, very productive and fruitful, and that we can come away with concrete outcomes that can help us continue to fashion the parliamentary approach to the global campaign to fight climate change. I wish you very successful deliberations. I hope that we will be lucid enough, taking into account the conclusions of the global stock taking that is taking place here at COP. We'll use this as a clarion call for us to do better as we face the compelling emergency of climate change. Thank you once again to our gracious hosts, and I wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you.
نشكر معالي الأمين العام للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي على هذه الكلمة. السادة الحضور، ما زلنا في حيز تأطير العمل البرلماني البيئي، ولكن هذه المرة سنأخذها من وجهة نظر رئاسة مؤتمر كوب 28 ممثلة في سعادة السفير ماجد السويدي المدير العام والممثل الخاص لرئاسة مؤتمر كوب 28. فليتفضل مشكورا.
أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the UAE, welcome to Dubai, and welcome to COP28. Allow me first to thank the Inter-Parliamentary Union and the Federal National Council for their leadership and for ensuring that the parliamentary meetings now have a home at COP. These meetings used to be held on the sidelines, but for the first year in the history of COPs, we are holding them in the green zone. We are setting a precedent. It is the result of COP28's presidency's proactive approach, and it wouldn't have been possible without the work of the IPU, the FNC, and the UNFCCC. This is a big achievement. Formally including parliamentarians in the COP process is essential to ensuring the adequate representation of all people from all nations. It supports the promotion of active legislations and adds a layer of accountability that the climate agenda might not have shed light on clearly before COP28. It ensures that COPs collectively agreed on commitments translate into actionable realities at the national level and potentially subnational level. As this meeting falls on the multi-action level day, it's imperative that we bring together all systems around the world to work more collaboratively and sustainably. This forum will also facilitate knowledge sharing, international cooperation, and the exchange of best practices amongst the various national parliamentarian members present here today. I hope that the UNFCCC involves parliamentarians in a more systematic manner in future COPs, but not only creating a fourth category of badges in the blue zone, but also potentially defining a quota within official negotiation delegations to truly bring the voice of the people to the front. Our climate goals are ambitious and match the monumental challenges and tasks that lie before us. It is the first time we have a global stocktake report since the Paris Agreement, and unfortunately, we know we are way off track. The current climate policies are inadequate to reach our goal of keeping 1.5 degrees C within reach. Urgent action is needed. We need to cut global emissions by 43% in the next 7 years. With your collaboration and international cooperation, we have a chance to reach our objectives. The global response to the global stocktake must include clear commitments and recommendations. And you, as parliamentarians, need to carry on this work back home. Everyone has a role to play to achieve the objectives of our action agenda, to fast-track the energy transition, to fix climate finance, to focus on people, nature, lives and livelihoods, and to foster inclusivity. You can align your country's legislation actions with global climate goals and to tackle environmental challenges. You can urge your governments, both nationally and subnationally, to implement the outcomes of the first global stocktake by updating your country's nationally determined contributions and the associated measures to fulfill them. You can support the effective implementation of mitigation and adaptation measures through the promotion of green initiatives. You can create the legislative frameworks to lay the foundations for a new climate finance infrastructure, for increased pledges to loss and damage, or to bridge the adaptation finance gap. You can address the interconnectedness between climate change, hunger, poverty, inequality, displacement, and security. You can protect the individuals and communities impacted by climate change, including women, youth, indigenous peoples who disproportionately bear the brunt of its consequences. You can ensure that the energy transition is a just transition. You have the power to explore innovative legislative and policy approaches to strengthen the alignment of national policies with international climate goals. You can hold governments accountable for the COP28 outcomes, and I trust you will. I thank you all for your participation today, and I thank everyone for listening to me and giving me this opportunity to speak to you. Thank you very much.
نشكر سعادة السفير على هذه الكلمة، والآن ندعو سعادة الدكتور إياد أبو مغلي ممثل المدير التنفيذي لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة فليتفضل مشكورا.
Good morning. Your Excellencies, distinguished members of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, esteemed guests. It's an honor to address this esteemed assembly on behalf of the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Ms. Inger Anderson, who sends her utmost respect but sincere apologies that she could not be with you today for the stellar work that she is doing in engagement with the COP28 negotiations. Allow me to share with you some perspectives on the current state of global climate crisis, underlining the urgent need for collective action and emphasizing the pivotal role of parliamentarians in crafting effective and transformative solutions. The urgency of addressing the climate crisis is not a mere assertion, but a stark reality vividly portrayed in recent scientific reports. The Adaptation Gap Report of 2023, Emissions Gap Report of 2023, and the Production Gap Reports collectively paint a picture of a world in dire need for immediate and concerted efforts. In the realm of adaptation, progress is sluggish on all fronts, particularly in finance, planning, and implementation. The financing gap for adaptation stands between US dollars 194 to 366 billion per year, a stark contrast to the rising tide of climate-related losses and damages. Developing nations requiring approximately 215 to 387 billion US dollars annually to adapt face a widening gap as multilateral and bilateral finance flows decline. Simultaneously, the emissions gap report reveals a disconcerting trend. Global greenhouse gas emissions rose by 1.2% from only 2021 to 2022, reaching a new record of 57.4 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. The collective efforts embodied in unconditional, nationally determined contributions, NDCs, would merely steer the world towards limiting temperature rise to 2.9 degrees. To achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, we must cut by 2030 emissions by 28% for the 2 degrees goal and 42% for the 1.5 degrees goal. As we navigate these challenges, the recently reached agreement on loss and damage on day one of COP28 sets a momentous tone for adaptation efforts. However, it underscores the need for sustained and accelerated action on various fronts. The transition to low carbon development is a shared responsibility, with countries possessing greater capacity and historical responsibility for emissions playing a crucial role. High-income and high-emitting countries within the G20 must take more ambitious and rapid action. The emissions gap report emphasizes this, highlighting the need for these nations to provide financial and technical support to developing nations. While low and middle income countries face economic and institutional challenges in transitioning to low carbon development, they also possess opportunities. Energy transitions, circular economy practices, nature-based solutions, and green job creation are avenues through which these nations can navigate this transition. The global community must foster collaboration and support to ensure that no country is left behind in this crucial journey. Ladies and gentlemen, in the landscape of urgency and challenge, the role of parliamentarians emerges as pivotal. Legislations stand as a cornerstone for enhanced and ambitious climate action, a sentiment underscored by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Well-designed laws serve as catalysts, providing incentives, reducing climatic risks, protecting the most vulnerable, strengthening institutions, and fostering certainty. They create an enabling environment for effective governance in the fight against climate change. Parliaments are not merely legislative bodies, but key actors in translating international commitments into tangible national legislation and policies. The Nusa Dua Declaration of 2022, adopted at the 144th IPU Assembly, accentuates the critical role of parliaments in aligning legislation and policies with global commitments, oversight and budgetary functions as articulated in the outcome document for the first global parliamentary meeting on achieving the SDGs of 2021. Position parliamentarians or parliaments as arbiters for national climate change targets. Ladies and gentlemen, the collaboration between the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, and the Inter-Parliamentary Union stands as a testament to the recognition of the intertwined nature of environmental sustainability and legislative action. The active Memorandum of Understanding between UNEP and IPU, reviewed annually, is a cornerstone for joint efforts. This collaboration is anchored in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals related to the environment and the execution of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, your call to action represents a commitment to addressing the global climate crisis through parliamentary influence and cooperation. Your vision to call parliaments to use their legislative and oversight roles to support the effective implementation of mitigation and emission reduction strategies while promoting green economy initiatives and clean technology practices is pragmatic. The acknowledgement of parliamentary oversight and budgeting as key elements in aligning national climate policies with international commitments reflects a clear understanding of the critical role that financial planning and accountability play in achieving climate goals. This holistic approach not only recognizes the urgency of climate action, but also underscores the significance of parliamentarians. I would like to express again the sincere appreciation and gratitude of Her Excellency Ms. Inger Anderson for extending the invitation to us, and we hope you and your deliberations all the success. Thank you very much indeed.
نشكر ممثل المدير التنفيذي لبرنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة على هذه الكلمة. أما الآن أعتقد أن السيدة كريستين آدم مديرة في قسم الشؤون القانونية من الأمانة العامة لاتفاقية الأمم المتحدة الإطارية بشأن تغير المناخ لديها إضافة تريد أن تتشاركها معنا، لذا أدعوها إلى اعتلاء المنصة مشكورة.
His Excellency, Speaker of the Federal National Council of the United Arab Emirates, Mr. Saka Gobash, Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Mr. Martin Shungung, His Excellency Ambassador Majid Al-Suwaidi, Director General and Special Representative of COP28, Honorable Speakers, Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. On behalf of the UNFCCC Executive Secretary Simon Steele, I'm grateful for having this opportunity to share with you, distinguished parliamentarians, some remarks on the important climate change negotiations that are happening right here now in Dubai. But I would like to start by extending a sincere and warm thank you to the government and the people of the United Arab Emirates, and in particular the community of Dubai, for both organizing COP28 and their generous hospitality. Climate change is happening in front of our eyes, and it's the biggest threat humanity has ever faced. Current global emissions are not in line with the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement, and our time to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is running out. The IPCC report published in March adds more clarity and detail to a simple truth. We have to do more on climate change, and we have to do it now. But it's not too late. The IPCC clearly demonstrates that it is possible to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius with rapid and deep emission reductions across all sectors of the global economy. Many feasible, effective, and low-cost mitigation and adaptation options exist to scale up progress across sectors and countries. We have already achieved a lot over the past 3 decades to address climate change. Through the Convention, the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, and countless other decisions and mandates, the international community has set out a clear infrastructure for the global response to climate change. And now is the time to put this global infrastructure to use and set out clear pathways for climate change action and support in the long term to move from negotiations to implementation. Parliamentarians, this COP28 here in Dubai, will feature the first global stocktake, a crucial opportunity for us to acknowledge the progress made thus far and the progress yet to be made. This stocktake is a chance for us to ramp up the ambition of our efforts and avoid the worst effects of climate change. The question is, will we use this chance or not? Parliamentarians, the use of your legislative and budgeting powers is crucial to the implementation of global objectives, and it is essential to put this responsibility at the center of every national agenda if the world is to meet the challenges of climate change. I encourage 3 actions that will help us achieve a positive outcome here at COP28 and a clear path for climate change action. First, do engage with the negotiations at this COP. Encourage your delegations to be as ambitious as possible in each of the core areas of work and in particular on the outcome of the global stocktake. The stocktake has to be more than yet another synthesis report. Countries must use this moment to agree on concrete milestones that will take us to our 2030 targets. Ladies and gentlemen, let me reiterate, we are at a crossroad. We are presented with an opportunity of a generation, and with the words of our Executive Secretary, it is the opportunity to course correct. Second, once back in your home countries, do encourage your governments to increase the ambition of their new NDCs in light of the outcome of the stocktake. This stocktake will allow us to better understand how we can increase our ambitions and meet our global commitments under the Paris Agreement. However, it will take more ambitious NDCs and thorough implementation by domestic systems to do better in the future. And third, use your parliamentary oversight and budgeting powers to ensure the alignment of national climate policies and legislation with international commitments and to achieve the objectives of your country's NDCs. Moreover, and as we have heard before, climate change is linked with other global challenges such as poverty, inequality, biodiversity loss, displacement, and security. Any sustainable solution to climate change must consider and respond to those other challenges. Governments should ensure that legislative measures underlying policies are developed and implemented based on ongoing inclusive stakeholder engagement and public participation processes. Measures must also take into account the local context, population, and priorities that are unique to each nation. In this, parliaments have a crucial role as being the assemblies closest on the ground. The climate transition has to be just. This means sharing benefits across society, ensuring that everyone, including women, indigenous peoples, youth, in all their diversity, have equal opportunities to benefit from this transition. You, parliamentarians, understand better than any of us the needs of the people you represent and how these play into the meeting of international obligations. In conclusion, your engagement is needed to ensure that a clear path forward is drawn and that the commitments of the Paris Agreement go from lofty goals to sustainable realities. The UNFCCC Secretariat is the guardian of this key multilateral process in which every country has an equal voice and where civil society representatives can safely defend their views. Your participation and contribution to the UN climate change process is crucial and important, and we in the UNFCCC Secretariat will continue to work with the IPU to support your engagement in the process. to facilitate capacity building in national parliaments to address climate change, and to develop and disseminate knowledge relevant to the legislative process in the implementation of states' climate commitments. In the words of our Executive Secretary, we must work together to teach climate action to run. On behalf of the Executive Secretary, thank you very much for your support, and we look forward to working with you here at COP28 and beyond. I thank you.
نشكر كريستين آدم على هذه الكلمة. السادة الحضور، أهمية جلستنا القادمة تكمن في دورها برسم ملامح عامة لكن دقيقة عن المشهد المناخي العالمي وآخر التكنولوجيات المستحدثة لعلاج الآثار المناخية السلبية، فضلاً عن الخطوات التي تم إنجازها على الأرض على صعيد تطبيق بنود اتفاقية باريس. بمعنى آخر، نحن أمام جلسة سترسم أوضح صورة لخارطة المناخ العالمي من مختلف زواياه العلمية والتقنية والمعرفية. لن أطيل عليكم وأترككم مع جلسة تمهيد السبيل، المعارف العلمية والتقدم العالمي والدعوة إلى الطموح المعزز. وأدعو مدير الجلسة السيد سيدريك فروليك عضو الجمعية الوطنية من جنوب أفريقيا إلى اعتلاء المنصة والسادة أعضاء الجلسة.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, Speakers of Parliament, parliamentarians, and distinguished guests. It is indeed a pleasure to join you here at this very important parliamentary meeting at COP28 with delegates from parliaments around the world. Following the excellent and thought-provoking remarks we heard in the official opening segment, we will now move on to the first of 4 thematic sessions for this meeting. I'm pleased to be moderating this first session on setting the scene, scientific insights, global progress, and the call for enhanced ambition. Before we begin, I would like to announce that throughout the day, we will be showing some 2-minute videos of parliamentarians talking about climate action as we switch sessions and new panelists come up to take their seats. As you have seen before, before we started the session, we had an opening segment with a video. These video interviews are part of the IPU's climate campaign, Parliaments for the Planet, which we'll be hearing more about later. The interviews show how climate change is affecting every country, but that parliamentarians are stepping up with local solutions all over the world. The first session is going to set the scene for the discussions that we'll have for the rest of the day. We are going to hear insights from the latest climate science, which will demonstrate the true gravity of climate change. We know that the first ever global stocktake for assessing collective progress on implementing the Paris Agreement is concluding at this COP here in Dubai. It is clear that we are far off track for maintaining the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. In this session, we will hear how this failure to mitigate climate change is unfolding on the ground and the catastrophic consequences and impact it is already having on local communities. Your Excellencies, speakers, honourable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. I now have the honour of introducing the first panellist in this session, who is one of the world's most renowned experts on climate change, Professor Jim Skee. Professor Skee is the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, with decades of climate science experience and expertise. Professor Skee, I now invite you to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and Your Excellencies, distinguished parliamentarians, delegates and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for this opportunity to address the parliamentary meeting of the Inter-Parliamentary Union at COP28 as the chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. Now, together with governments, lawmakers are key IPCC stakeholders. An IPCC was created to provide policymakers with regular assessments of the scientific basis of climate change, its impacts, future risks and options for adaptation and mitigation. And I'm going to focus my remarks on the three themes in the title of this session: scientific insights, global progress, and the call for enhanced ambition. So first of all, what does the science actually tell us? Well, as we've heard already, the sixth assessment report of the IPCC confirms that current trends in emissions and climate action are incompatible with a sustainable and equitable world. This has already led to global warming of 1.1 degrees Celsius, resulting in more frequent, more intense extreme weather events. This has severely affected the lives and livelihoods of more than 3 billion people who are highly vulnerable, living across large parts of Africa, as well as South Asia, Central and South America, small islands, and the Arctic. And people who are most vulnerable have contributed least to global warming. Losses and damages are unfortunately part of our future. Hitting the most vulnerable ecosystems and people especially hard. But actions taken now can make a difference. And the options available to adapt are becoming more constrained and less effective, however, with every increment of warming. Some future changes are unavoidable, and some could indeed be irreversible. But deep, rapid and sustained greenhouse gas emissions reductions across all sectors increase the likelihood of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And emissions will need to be cut by around half by 2030 and reach net zero carbon dioxide emissions in the early 2050s. So secondly, where do we stand in terms of global progress? Now, assessing existing mitigation policies in place up to December 2020, the IPCC highlighted that we are not on course to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. In fact, without strengthening current mitigation measures, we are on track for global warming of 3 degrees over the 21st century, as confirmed by the UNEP Emissions Gap report that came out recently. Progress on climate adaptation has increased, but it's uneven. We're not adapting fast enough. And this aligns also with the recent findings of the UNEP 2023 Adaptation Gap report, which notes that adaptation efforts are actually slowing when they should be accelerating to catch up with increasing climate change impacts. Now that is gloomy, but it is not all bad news. Our sixth assessment report notes that there's evidence of increased climate action. Some countries and cities have already shown what is possible, and there have been sustained emission reductions that have taken place in around 20 countries. And this has begun to bend the emissions curve globally, even if we're yet to see an emissions peak. More than half of global emissions are covered by climate legislation, policies and institutions, and this speaks to the achievement of legislators globally. 20% of global emissions are covered by some form of carbon pricing, though at levels insufficient to bring about substantial changes. And there's more good news, obviously, about renewable energy and energy storage. In the past decade, there have been significant decreases in costs, with reductions of about 85% for solar energy, 55% for wind power, and 85% for batteries. The good news is also that many mitigation efforts have synergies with adaptation and other sustainable development goals. Trade-offs can be managed and synergies can be enhanced. But just a reminder, despite these positive developments, unless we undertake immediate and deep emission reductions across all sectors, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius will be beyond reach. Now, this brings me to the third point, which is about increased ambition. Our report states that across all sectors, there are choices that exist today that could cut global greenhouse gas emissions by half compared to 2019 levels at a relatively low cost, or some could even be self-funding. And the largest potentials lie within energy and agriculture, forestry, and other land use. Renewable energy, particularly wind and solar, offers the most significant potential within the energy sector, given the remarkable cost declines that I've already highlighted. And in the short run, there are opportunities abound in demand sectors like building, transport, and industry. Scenarios that achieve net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2050 include the phase-out of unabated coal and very significant reductions in the use of oil and gas, with most of our electricity coming from zero or low-carbon sources, especially renewables. So we have a rapidly closing window of opportunity to reach our climate goals through ambitious reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. More ambitious and determined climate action now will reduce the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and avoid the need for very rapid reductions in subsequent years. Delaying action will make future emission reductions far more challenging, costly, and disruptive, posing challenges to a just transition. The choice and actions decided in this decade will have impacts now and for hundreds of years. As elected representatives of your communities, interested in their well-being, prosperity and development, I'm sure a question lingers: what is it that we can do? And here I'd just like to offer three thoughts to finish off. First, on urgency. The next few years will be absolutely critical if we want to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. Our actions today will reverberate for hundreds of years. And there's my second point. We do have the agency. Viable solutions exist to address climate change today. And finally, I must mention equity. Those who are most vulnerable contribute and have contributed least to climate change. Considerations of equity are critically important, both internationally and within countries. Social consensus on ambitious climate action will be achieved only if the solutions are and are perceived to be fair. So, closing my remarks, I extend my best wishes for your endeavours in securing the well-being and prosperity of the communities you represent. And I strongly encourage you to make effective use of the power of science in supporting these efforts. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Ski, for your remarks, which show the true urgency to act on the climate crisis. I would now like to welcome the next panelist, Mr. Samalu Penitala Tio, who is the Speaker of Parliament of Tuvalu, a country that is certainly on the front lines of climate change. Speaker Tio is also the winner of the 2023 IPU Creamer Passy Prize for his remarkable work to confront climate change and protect his country. Speaker Tio, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, honorable parliamentarians, I stand before you today to address a matter of utmost urgency and global significance: the climate crisis that threatens the very fabric of our existence. Today's session is not merely about setting the scene. It is about acknowledging the stark reality we face, understanding the scientific insights that illuminate this reality, and recognizing the progress we have made while recognizing the gaps that still persist. Our focus today is on Tuvalu, a nation that epitomizes the vulnerability of small island developing states to the impacts of climate change. Tuvalu, with its pristine atolls and crystal clear waters, is not just a picturesque paradise. It is a frontline witness to the consequences of rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and the existential threat posed by climate change. Scientific advancements have provided us with invaluable insights into the gravity of the situation. The latest findings underscore the urgency of our collective action. The climate crisis is not a distant threat, but a present reality, affecting communities, ecosystems, and economies across the globe. Tuvalu, like many other nations, grapples with the tangible impacts: increased frequency of tropical cyclones, coastal erosion, and the encroachment of the sea upon its territory. As we convene to discuss the outcomes of the global stocktake exercise, we must confront the truth about our progress towards the goals set forth in the Paris Agreement. The global stocktake serves as a mirror reflecting the collective efforts of nations worldwide. It is a measure of our commitment to mitigating climate change, adapting to its impacts, and fostering resilience in the face of an evolving climate context. Tuvalu's plight is not an isolated case. It is a microcosm of the challenges faced by vulnerable nations globally. The rising sea levels threaten the very existence of Tuvalu's people and culture. The urgency for enhanced ambition cannot be overstated. The Paris Agreement set the framework for global cooperation, but it is the ambition of individual nations that will determine our success in averting the worst impacts of climate change. We must use this platform to motivate transformative action. The call for mid-course corrections is not a sign of failure, but an acknowledgement of the evolving nature of our climate challenge. It is an opportunity to align our efforts with the goals of the Paris Agreement and strengthen our resolve to leave no one behind. Parliamentarians play a crucial role in this journey. Your oversight is pivotal in holding governments accountable for their climate commitments. The decisions made within these walls reverberate far beyond, shaping the destiny of nations and the well-being of future generations. In conclusion, let us remember that the stage we set today goes beyond rhetoric. It is a call to action, a call for enhanced ambition, and a commitment to a sustainable future. Tuvalu and nations like it are not just on the front line of climate change. They are on the front lines of our collective conscience. Let our discussions today inspire meaningful change, for in the face of adversity, our unity is our greatest strength. Thank you, and Fafdailas.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, for your honest account of the climate change reality as it plays out on the ground in Tuvalu. I would now like to pass the floor to the final panelist, Ms. Shea Bastida. Ms. Bastida is an indigenous climate activist and co-founder of the Re-Earth Initiative. Ms. Bastida is at the forefront of the climate movement as a leader both for youth and the indigenous peoples. Ms. Bastida, please take the floor.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to address you, parliamentaries, special guests. My name is Shea Bastida, and I am a youth climate activist from the highlands of central Mexico from the Otomi Toltec indigenous community. My name, Shea, means soft rain, and in my language, the word for skin is the same as the word for the outer layer of the earth. It is embedded in our culture, in our knowledge, that when we hurt the earth, we hurt ourselves. And we know that decisions around the world have not been made with that level of consciousness. My culture has a different worldview than the one in which we're operating in today. It is one of reciprocity. It is one where we take, but also give back, where we acknowledge that Mother Earth can only thrive alongside all of the beings that exist on this earth. There is a deep sense of responsibility, a deep sense of respect, and a deep sense of intergenerational consciousness, where we have something called the 7-generation principles, making every decision based on the wisdom of the past 7 generations to ensure the stability of the future 7 generations. And I ask, have we behaved as if we are holding 7 generations alongside us? And each one of you, each one of us is in the middle of that 7 generation. If you take myself, my mom, my grandma, my great-grandmother, my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great-granddaughter, each of you, each of us are able to meet those 7 generations in our lifetimes. And we forget that when we make decisions, we hold that power to take care or to give away. My dad once told me that we are on earth to take care of life, not to take over. Now I would like to share a small poem because I know you've heard it all. You've heard the science, you've heard the call for ambition. I could say mitigation, I could say global stocktake, I could say adaptation over and over again, and we will hear it 1,000 times again in these walls. But what we need is to ground ourselves in our humanity once again. So I want you to think of yourself as a tree with strong roots that connect you with the womb of the earth, roots that absorb groundwater, enrich you every day, and give you the strength to stand tall. Picture yourself with a strong core, an unshakable center that is the source of your vitality, your love, your fire. You have strong and long branches that can reach anything, anywhere. Receive the rain, receive the wind, receive the sun, receive and give. Give your fruits, give your shelter, your seeds. Be unshakable, be adaptable, be strong, be loving. But most of all, be yourself, take your space, take your time. Respect time. Things take time. Change takes time, but change will come. And change must come. Indigenous communities have been sharing our wisdom for decades. And it is definitely hard to translate the wisdom of indigenous communities into science that the world can understand and rally behind. That is why things like the IPCC report are so instrumental. And now there is a new framework called the planetary boundaries that shows us that we have surpassed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. Those include climate, the biosphere, nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, ocean acidification, land systems, fresh water, and aerosols. But there is a story of success because humanity was able to agree on ozone emissions. And just like that story of success, we must build the path forward so that I don't come into this room thinking that in 30 years I will be in your seats and that new youth activists will come up here and ask me what I did 30 years ago to ensure their livelihoods. We are here standing as a united youth movement to ask you to please think not only of your children, but all of the generations that come after us and the wisdom of the past, so that we can give a world that we are proud of, and that I can stop hearing from older generations that they could have done better. I'm begging you to be the people who do better, and I promise you that we will not stop rallying behind you as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bastida, for your inspiring remarks, which I'm sure motivated a lot of parliamentarians in this room and outside to act. Excellencies, honorable speakers, honorable members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen, we have now heard from all the esteemed panelists in this session. Panelists, I would like to thank each one of you for your incredibly insightful remarks, which certainly have helped us to set the scene for the rest of the discussions that will follow today. We will now begin with the debates with a high-level segment for speakers of Parliament. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
My Parliament, my planet. Sam Teal, and I am from Tuvalu, and I'm the Speaker of the Parliament of Tuvalu. Well, the Parliament right now is very vocal in the climate change stance. I mean, even right here now in this country, we're having a strong delegation. We have the Minister of Finance, who is the Minister of Climate Change also. And we also have our Prime Minister here in this city, also advocating for climate change. And what we are really looking for is funding, funds, to help us adapt to these changes in climate that we are being affected by. The main thing that's really affecting Tuvalu is this sea level rise phenomena. We're trying to build up our country, to build up by another 1 or 2 meters, add on more soil and on top of it. So we need money for dredging the lagoons and the ocean and piling it up on the islands, to raise the elevation of the island by 1 or 2 meters, and that'll be able to save the islands by another 50 to 100 years.
أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، بذلت مختلف دول العالم جهوداً جبارة في مجال التغير المناخي، حيث جرى وضع منظومات عمل مختلفة تتضمن أسس قانونية وتشريعية وعلمية لمحاكاة الشأن البيئي ومحاولة وقف التدهور الحاصل في المشهد البيئي العالمي. نلتقي اليوم في هذه التظاهرة البرلمانية العالمية الحاشدة ليسلط كل منا الضوء على التجارب المميزة في هذا المجال ومحاولة وضع نقاط عمل مشتركة تؤدي في نهاية المطاف إلى حشد الجهود العالمية للحد من آثار التغير المناخي. أما الآن أدعو معالي نيلي موتي رئيسة البرلمان الزامبي لإدارة الجلسة الخاصة بكلمات أصحاب المعالي والسعادة.
Good morning, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to be here today and to chair this high-level segment of Speakers of Parliament. The high-level segment will be the first debate of our meeting today, and it will focus on lessons learned from the global stocktake and national efforts to advance climate action to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. I am glad that we are joined by numerous speakers of Parliament that have come to share their experiences and views with us. I am sure that this will be an inspiring session. So let us now begin. As this is time limited, as time is very limited, I ask speakers of this segment to limit their remarks to a maximum of 3 minutes. Please, a maximum of 3 minutes. I now invite the first speaker, my colleague from Tonga. The Right Honorable Speaker from Tonga. The next speaker will be the speaker from Mexico. Please get ready.
Your Excellency Saka Gobash, Speaker of the FNC, Honourable Speakers, Mr. Secretary General Martin Chongang, Excellencies, colleagues and friends, on behalf of the Kingdom of Tonga, I wish to convey our most sincere gratitude to our most generous host, the United Arab Emirates, for your warm and excellent hospitality extended to my delegation since our arrival. The global stocktake is at the heart of discussions during COP28. According to the most recent synthesis report we've heard this morning, we are all significantly off track, and thereby requiring urgent action to combat the growing threats posed by climate change. This stark reality means that the delay in implementing the Paris Agreement further exacerbates the vulnerabilities of us at the front line, small island developing states such as Tonga. At the outset, for small and vulnerable states like Tonga, we are deeply concerned that developed countries who have committed to promise climate finance has come late to the table. The $100 billion a year promised has finally arrived this year, 2 years late. But nevertheless, as we've heard this morning, there is still room for greater ambition. While Tonga makes negligible contributions to global greenhouse gas emissions, it remains committed to obligations under the Paris Agreement, despite facing extremely high-risk adverse impacts of climate change, including the harsh reality of displacement and forced migration. Parliaments, therefore, have a crucial role. Firstly, it is critical to ensure a collective voice from vulnerable states. In August this year, Tonga and its parliament hosted a conference of the Pacific Island Parliamentary Group, or PIPG, which is a unique forum of speakers and presidents of parliaments from all across the Pacific and Oceania. This conference earlier this year deliberated on the theme Parliaments, Climate Change and Disasters, from Impact and Science to Action. The PIPG conference unanimously adopted the Whangatapu Declaration, where parliaments committed to advance climate action and progress on achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. In addition, the Legislative Assembly Tonga's Standing Committee on Environment and Climate Change is spearheading its efforts, doing its part to champion and holding our government to account for its commitments under NDCs and international. The committee has been robust and actively driving communication and outreach for climate action within the country. To that end, Tonga is pleased that it met its target under its second NDCs
Honorable colleague, if you can wind up, your time is run out.
to plant 1 million trees in 2023 this year. In summing up, I hope that this platform will springboard to generate a clear course of parliamentary and climate action and make commitments and targets to increase our ambitions for climate action. It's urgently required, and I thank you for your opportunity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I invite the Honorable Speaker of Mexico. The next will be the Right Honorable Speaker from Zimbabwe.
Honorable Asamblea. México es una nación singularmente sensible a los temas de medio ambiente porque nuestra privilegiada posición geográfica nos nutre de una gran riqueza de ecosistemas y especies de gran importancia para nuestro país, pero también nos posiciona en un lugar de alto riesgo. México ratificó el Acuerdo de París en el año 2016 y tenemos una ley de cambio climático desde el 2012, en la cual ya incorporamos los propios acuerdos de la Acción de París, pero también emitimos ya una estrategia de acción climática enfocadas a la educación sobre el cambio climático para la transformación social. La ley de cambio climático ha experimentado diversas modificaciones y quiero destacar alguna que es, emitimos ya los esquemas de compensación por parte de la organización que son altamente contaminantes. De una forma también sobresalen las reformas para incluir el principio de paridad de género, muy importante, las mujeres en la acción climática y para los organismos públicos, así como la relativa a emitir los atlas de riesgo de vulnerabilidad en el cambio climático. México ha instrumentado diversos programas y estrategias fundamentales para afirmar su compromiso en favor del medio ambiente. Contamos con una infraestructura robusta, institucional, para la toma de decisiones en materia. Tenemos también el Sistema Nacional de Cambio Climático integrado por los 3 órdenes de gobierno y hay una concertación política y administrativa en torno a esto. Y esto tiene que ver con tener esa voluntad política para poder transformar en sí la realidad. En el año 2021 se presentó el Programa Especial de Cambio Climático con la ambición 2021-2024 y ahí se especifican acciones de gobierno federal e identifica a cada uno de los responsables, nombre y apellido, qué tiene que hacer cada quien. ¿Cuál es el papel del Parlamento? El control. ¿Qué otro papel hacemos? La rendición de cuentas, la fiscalización, el sistema de estar observando y dándole seguimiento a la política pública. Y es por eso que es muy importante el papel de los parlamentos. Les quiero comentar que en noviembre del año 2022 México actualizó su contribución determinada a nivel nacional al aumentar sus metas de reducción de gases de efecto invernadero de 22 a 35% ya en una meta para el 2030. Con respecto, obviamente, a su línea de base. Para ello contemplamos emplear recursos nacionales, pero también en un porcentaje también de recursos internacionales que está previsto para lo que tiene que ver con las energías limpias. Conforme a las decisiones estratégicas que se implementan, es posible que México aumente la reducción de gases de efecto invernadero en un 40% para el 2030. ¿Qué les quiero decir con eso? Estamos cumpliendo, estamos comprometidos. No estamos jugando al discurso. Nosotros ya hemos pasado del discurso a la acción.
Honorable Speaker, if you can wind up.
Yo termino, señora presidenta, con mucho gusto. Nada más les quiero decir que de esta actualidad tiene un acontecimiento que México está de luto por los estragos del huracán Otis. Se perdieron muchas vidas y recursos materiales. Fue una devastación total y esto es un grito para nosotros que nos obliga a actuar en consecuencia. Seguimos en la lucha, compañeras y compañeros legisladores y legisladoras. Es cuanto. Gracias por permitirme participar.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. The Honorable Speaker of Zimbabwe. The next will be the Honorable Speaker from Bahrain.
Your Excellencies, on behalf of the Zimbabwean delegation and my own behalf, please accept our profound gratitude for the invitation to attend this crucial assembly taking place at this opportune time, which coincides with the inaugural global stocktake of the 2015 Paris Agreements, imperative to collectively assess the limitation of rise of the global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, building resilience and aligning financial flows with low greenhouse gas emissions and climate-resilient ecosystem. This global stocktake is anchored on mitigation action, adaptation, and means of implementation at country levels, guided by the national determined contributions. Accordingly, the Zimbabwe Parliament has embraced the implementation of Zimbabwe National Determined Contribution in collaboration with the executive through the oversight role of its Environment Portfolio Committee and its Thematic Committee on Climate Change, housed in the Senate, which continually ensure that there is compliance with the reporting, monitoring, reviewing of the Paris Agreement obligations. Thus, in 2015, Zimbabwe committed itself to reducing its energy sector greenhouse gas emissions by 33% per capita by 2030. In 2021, Zimbabwe revised upwards its NDC's ambition to 40% per capita by 2030. Your Excellency, Zimbabwe ratified and domesticated climate change and ozone layer depleting international agreements such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and its Paris Agreement, the Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer and its Montreux Protocol, as well as the Kigali Amendment on substances that deplete this ozone layer, in an effort to demonstrate Zimbabwe's commitment to containing climate change catastrophic impacts. Furthermore, Parliament, working collaboratively with the executive, is implementing critical environmental related policies such as the country's Vision 2030, National Climate Policy, National Climate Change Response Strategy, National Climate Change Learning Strategy, the Climate Change
Honorable Speaker, if you can wind up, your time is up.
Definitely. The Climate Change Communication Strategy, the Renewable Energy Policy, and Biofuels Policy. Now, the implementation of these policies has canvassed a stout national budget for effective execution. Soon, Parliament will enact a robust Climate Change Act in order to legally synchronize all the climate change policies in Zimbabwe.
Honorable Speaker, please wind up.
I wind up by thanking our host, Excellency Speaker of the Federal National Council, for the excellent hospitality and logistics, and also wishing COP28 success. And I say climate change should not conquer humanity. It is humanity that must conquer climate change. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I now invite the speaker from Bahrain. Next will be the speaker from Senegal.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. معالي الأخ صقر غباش رئيس المجلس الوطني الاتحادي بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة ورؤساء وأعضاء المجالس والبرلمانات والوفود المشاركة، معالي السيد مارتن شونغونغ الأمين العام للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، الأخوة والأخوات الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدنا المشاركة اليوم في هذا الاجتماع البرلماني الهام والذي ينعقد لأول مرة في المنطقة الخضراء لمؤتمر الأطراف من أجل رسم مسار تنموي يهدف إلى تكثيف الجهود البرلمانية وتفعيل أدواتها بشأن تغير المناخ والتعاون مع الجهات المعنية من خلال منظومة تشريعية عصرية وجهود برلمانية متعاظمة وصولا إلى عالم أكثر استدامة ومستقبل أكثر أمانا وازدهارا للبشرية. الحضور الكرام، إن مملكة البحرين وبقيادة حضرة صاحب الجلالة الملك حمد بن عيسى آل خليفة ملك البلاد المعظم حفظه الله ورعاه، ودعم ومتابعة صاحب السمو الملكي الأمير سلمان بن حمد آل خليفة ولي العهد رئيس مجلس الوزراء حفظه الله، تواصل تنفيذ مبادراتها الحضارية لتعزيز الأمن البيئي وتؤكد على التزامها باتفاقية باريس وبمتابعة ما أعلنت عنه في قمة غلاسكو بشأن خفض الانبعاثات بنسبة 30% بحلول عام 2035 والوصول للحياد الكربوني في عام 2060. وقد أعلن جلالة الملك المعظم حفظه الله ورعاه خلال كلمته السامية في هذا المؤتمر عن خطة العمل الوطنية لتحقيق الحياد الكربوني من خلال 3 مسارات حيوية بجانب تدشين استراتيجية وطنية للطاقة وإطلاق صندوق لتكنولوجيا المناخ بقيمة 750 مليون دولار، بالإضافة إلى تأسيس منطقة صفاء لتعويض الانبعاثات الكربونية وتوجيه إيراداتها لتمويل مشاريع إقليمية ودولية تختص في ذلك، ودعوة المهتمين للقدوم إلى مملكة البحرين التي تتميز بالبنية التحتية المتكاملة والأنظمة عالية الاستجابة والموارد البشرية الماهرة لتجربة حلول الطاقة وآفاقها بجانب منظومة تشريعية بيئية متطورة ومتقدمة. الحضور الكرام، ومع كامل تأييدنا لإعلان كوب 28 بشأن المناخ والإغاثة والتعافي والسلام والوثيقة الختامية للاجتماع البرلماني الدولي، فإننا نؤكد أن المساعي الحثيثة لتحقيق الأمن البيئي بحاجة ضرورية إلى مواجهة تحديات الأمن الإنساني في ظل ما يتعرض له الشعب الفلسطيني في قطاع غزة من اعتداءات مستمرة تطال الأبرياء من النساء والشيوخ والأطفال، مؤكدين في هذا السياق موقف مملكة البحرين الثابت في دعم القضية الفلسطينية وحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني في إقامة دولته المستقلة وفق وحل الدولتين والتزامه بالقرارات الشرعية الدولية. ختاما، نتوجه بخالص الشكر والتقدير لجهود دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة الشقيقة ودورها الرائد والمتميز بقيادة صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان رئيس دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة حفظه الله ورعاه في تحقيق الأهداف المناخية والتعامل مع التحديات البيئية العالمية، ومعربين عن عميق شكرنا وامتناننا لمعالي الأخ صقر غباش رئيس المجلس الوطني الاتحادي الإماراتي على حسن التنظيم لهذا الاجتماع البرلماني العالمي. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much. We will now hear from the speaker from Senegal. He will be followed by the speaker from Tajikistan.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Secrétaire général de l'UP, chers collègues présidents et chefs de délégation, cette rencontre d'aujourd'hui nous donne l'opportunité de partager nos expériences nationales respectives dans le cadre du bilan mondial sur les efforts menés pour la réalisation des objectifs de l'accord de Paris sur les changements climatiques. En ce qui le concerne, l'Assemblée nationale du Sénégal a initié en 2019 une réforme destinée à renforcer l'action parlementaire pour l'éclatement de la Commission développement et aménagement du territoire pour dissocier et renforcer certaines activités liées aux enjeux climatiques en les érigeant en commission. Cette réforme a ainsi permis la création de la Commission de l'environnement, du développement durable et de la transition écologique, mais aussi la Commission de l'énergie et des ressources minérales. À ces mesures décisives s'ajoute l'adoption du Code forestier, du Code de l'environnement pétrolier aussi et gazier, mais aussi du Code minier. L'objectif de ce renforcement du dispositif législatif est de s'adapter aux défis des changements climatiques en prenant en charge, autant que faire se peut, la réduction des gaz à effet de serre et en assurant une meilleure protection de l'environnement. Dans cette même dynamique, l'État du Sénégal a totalement confectionné cette année un budget vert avec des initiatives visant justement à lutter contre l'émission de ces gaz à effet de serre dans tous les secteurs concernés par des actions de reboisement et d'élimination du carbone. Chers collègues, pour le continent africain, l'enjeu et d'autres pays, certainement, l'enjeu climatique consiste à concilier le dynamisme économique et le développement durable dans un souci de réduction de la pauvreté et de protection de la sécurité humaine. Il est ainsi essentiel de préserver l'environnement par une exploitation rationnelle et modérée de la nature, mais aussi de ses nombreuses ressources. S'agissant spécifiquement du financement des opérations d'exploration sur l'énergie fossile en Afrique et dans d'autres pays, nous devrons être tous guidés par un esprit de justice et d'équité. Et éviter aussi, comme fortement souligné par son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République, Macky Sall, de réaliser un objectif par une injustice. Je le cite, dans le cadre d'une transition d'une durée de 20 à 30 ans, nous devrons développer le gaz et permettre que les banques de développement financent des projets gaziers. Les pays africains devraient investir dans des énergies propres tout en continuant à avoir des énergies de base qui permettent le développement et l'accès à l'électricité aux 600 millions de personnes qui en sont encore privées. Nous interdire l'exploitation du gaz serait une injustice. Fin de citation. C'est dans l'esprit de cette conviction forte du président Macky Sall que je vous invite à porter, chers collègues parlementaires, cette noble vision qui s'inscrit parfaitement dans le triple objectif décliné par la présidence émiratie de cette COP28, à savoir mettre l'accent sur le bilan mondial, la transition énergétique et la solidarité entre les pays du Nord et ceux du Sud. Qu'elle trouve ici, cette présidence, sous la conduite éclairée et avisée de son Altesse, l'expression de notre infinie reconnaissance et de nos hommages mérités. L'Assemblée nationale du Sénégal, par ma voix, réaffirme ici et maintenant son engagement résolu à œuvrer dans ce sens avec cette grande famille interparlementaire. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I now invite my colleague, the Speaker of Tajikistan. The next speaker will be from Uruguay.
محترم رئیس ها، خانمان و جنابان، پیش از همه میخواهم به کشور دوست و برادر امارات متحده عرب و سازمان ملل متحد برای تشکیل کنفرانس امروزه منتداری خود را بیان نمایم. امروزها مشکلات تغییریابی اقلیم و حفظ محیط زیست از موضوعهای داغ جامعه جهانی منصوب یافته بدون همکاری و همگرایی بین المللی حل آن غیر امکان گردیده است. قابل ذکر است که با مقصد پست کردن تاثیر منفی تغییریابی اقلیم بر ساحه‌های اجتماعی و اقتصادی کشور، حکومت تاجیکستان استراتژی ملی مطابق شوی با تغییریابی اقلیم را برای دوره تا سال 2030 تطبیق می نماید. یکی از نشانه‌های واضح همبستگی آب و اقلیم این آبشوی با سرعت پیریخا می باشد. طی چند ده ساله اخیر از 13,000 پیریخ تاجیکستان که منبع تشکل یافتنی تا 60% آبهای آسیای مرکزی می باشد، 1,000 پر آب شده است. تبریم میدونید 15 دکبر سال 2022 مجمع عمومی سازمان ملل متحد با پشتیبانی از تشبس‌های پنجم پرزیدنت جمهوری تاجیکستان محترم امام علی رحمان در سایه آب قطعنامه را درباره اعلان کردن سال 2025 سال بین المللی حفظ پریخ‌ها قبول کرد. طبق این سند همچون 21 مارس روز جهانی پریخ‌ها اعلان شده در نزد سازمان ملل متحد فوند مقصدناک حفظ پریخ‌ها تأسیس داده می شود. با تشبس دیگر تاجیکستان در سایه آب مجمع عمومی سازمان ملل متحد 9 قطعنامه قبول کرده است. حالا تطبیق 10 ساله آب برای رشد استوار سالهای 2018-2028 ثمره بخش ادامه دارد. ما قرارهای سازمان ملل متحد را در روند حل مشکلات تغییریابی اقلیم و نارسایی آب بسیار مهم و ثمره بخش می‌دانیم. حاضرین گرامی، باید گفت که پارلمانت جمهوری تاجیکستان در برابر تشبس‌های قانونگذاری مرکزی چاره‌بینی‌های گوناگون عاید به حفظ محیط زیست و تغییریابی اقلیم میباشد. در طول فعالیت خود پارلمانت کشور ما وابسته به حفظ محیط زیست و تغییریابی اقلیم قانون‌های مکمل را قبول نموده است. مجموعاً پارلمانت امروزه فعالیت خود را برای اجرای عهدهداری‌های بین المللی جمهوری تاجیکستان در سمت تغییریابی اقلیم و حفظ محیط زیست توسط تکمیل قانونگذاری راه اندازی نموده است. در این راستا تاجیکستان با رعایت معیارها و هدفهای رشد استوار پیوسته برای تکمیل قانون‌های سایه اکولوژی تدبیرها می‌اندیشد. حالا لایحه قانون جمهوری تاجیکستان درباره حفظ پریخ‌ها در پارلمان آماده گردیده وابسته به تهیه لایحه کدکس اکولوژی جمهوری تاجیکستان کارها آغاز گردیدند. خانم‌ها و جنابان، اطمینان دارم سند نهایی که در نتیجه چهارمین امروزه قبول می‌گردد با تشکل مکانیزم همکاری‌ها در سطح ملی، منطقوی و گلوبالی مساعدت خواهد کرد. از توجهتان سپاسگزارم.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We will now hear from the Speaker of Uruguay, to be followed by the Speaker from Morocco.
Good morning, Excellency, Mrs. and Mr. Speakers, ladies and gentlemen. My speech, my presentation, I'll do it in Spanish. Can you use the headphone, please? Thank you. Los parlamentos desempeñan un papel fundamental en la respuesta al cambio climático a través de la formulación y aprobación de leyes. Eso es todo conocido por nosotros. Y también el seguimiento de la implementación de políticas públicas que deben realizarse a corto, mediano y largo plazo. Es mi intención en estos breves minutos mencionarles aspectos y desafíos fundamentales que nuestro Parlamento, el Parlamento del Uruguay, ha trabajado y estará trabajando en el futuro sobre el cambio climático. Nuestro Parlamento es responsable de aprobar todas las leyes ambientales que regulan emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, promueven energías renovables y establecen estándares de eficiencia energética. Estas leyes son fundamentales para abordar las causas y mitigar los efectos del cambio climático en nuestro país. Trabajamos en la ratificación de acuerdos y tratados internacionales como el Acuerdo de París. Hemos establecido metas y compromisos nacionales para reducir las emisiones y adaptarnos al cambio climático. Nuestro Parlamento también aprueba todos los años el presupuesto nacional. Y cada uno de esos años, tanto en el pasado como en el presente y así pensado para el futuro, hemos aumentado de forma sostenida los recursos y las asignaciones para iniciativas relacionadas con el cambio climático, como inversiones en infraestructura verde, investigación en tecnologías limpias y programas de adaptación. También establecemos regulaciones que obligan a las empresas y a las industrias a informar sobre sus emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, implementar prácticas sostenibles y cumplir con todas las normativas vigentes en carácter de cuidado ambiental. Esto influye de forma positiva en el comportamiento de las empresas a reducir su huella de carbono. A través de la aprobación de leyes de incentivo y subsidios, estamos fomentando el desarrollo y la adopción de fuentes de energía renovables, contribuyendo así a la reducción de gases de efecto invernadero. Trabajamos también en coordinación con la educación pública y privada de nuestro país. Respaldamos iniciativas educativas para aumentar la conciencia pública sobre el cambio climático y fomentar la participación ciudadana en la toma de decisiones relacionadas con el medio ambiente. Pensamos, compartimos y generamos acciones a través de leyes que influyen en la planificación urbana, al aprobar leyes que promueven el transporte público, el diseño de las ciudades sostenibles y la protección de áreas verdes, todo cual puede tener impacto significativo en la mitigación del cambio climático para nuestro país. Ha sido muy importante y crucial para nuestro país que el Gobierno con el Parlamento trabajen en estrecha colaboración con otros actores, incluidos los gobiernos locales, organizaciones no gubernamentales y el sector privado, para abordar de manera efectiva el cambio climático. La coordinación y la cooperación internacional también son esenciales para enfrentar todos estos desafíos. Tenemos participación activa en los foros internacionales donde se discuten y negocian cuestiones globales como cambios climáticos, desarrollo sostenibles y seguridad
Speaker, if you
global.
can wind up, your time is up.
Ya finalizo y muchas gracias, señora Presidenta. La cooperación entre naciones es esencial para abordar eficazmente problemas que afectan al nivel mundial. Y en muchos casos las decisiones parlamentarias se pueden reflejar en los compromisos internacionales. Me hubiese gustado también hablar del sistema de aranceles para el futuro, que creo que van a incidir mucho en la estimulación del comercio mundial y de las buenas prácticas para los productores. Trabajemos juntos, tenemos un futuro mejor. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll now invite the speaker from Morocco, to be followed by the speaker from Uzbekistan.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. معالي صقر غباش رئيس المجلس الوطني الاتحادي، الأمين العام للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي، معالي الرؤساء، حضرات البرلمانيين والبرلمانيات، إنه من دواعي السرور أن نتواجد اليوم في دولة شقيقة، شاكرا لكم معالي الرئيس حسن الضيافة، وليس بالغريب على دولة الإمارات قيادة وشعبا هذه الضيافة. كما أنني أود بداية أن أهنئكم معالي الرئيس صقر غباش على تجديد الثقة فيكم كرئيسا للمجلس الاتحادي الوطني الإماراتي، وهو اعتزاز لنا كرؤساء برلمانات بالعمل الذي تقومون به. ولا بد بداية أن نعرج على أنه شكل دائما موضوع محاربة التغيرات المناخية بعدا محوريا في الرؤية التنموية لبلاد المملكة المغربية، حيث نعمل بأسلوب فعال ومبتكر على الانتقال الطاقي التدريجي إلى نموذج تنموي وطني طموح أقل اعتمادا على الطاقات الملوثة، وذلك من خلال تبني سياسات استباقية تهدف إلى تقليص انبعاث الغازات الدفيئة والتصدي لظاهرة الاحتباس الحراري، وتبني مزيج طاقي متقدم عماده الطاقات البديلة بأشكالها الشمسية والريحية والبحرية. وقد وصلنا إلى نسبة طاقات متجددة تصل إلى 37% من المزيج الطاقي الوطني، وهو مؤشر يؤكد قدرة بلادي على تحقيق الأهداف الانتقالي إلى 52% من الطاقة بحلول سنة 2030، والوصول إلى الهدف الأكبر المتمثل في صفر كربون سنة 2050. وكل هذه التوجهات التي تمت بفضل القيادة الرشيدة لمولاي صاحب الجلالة الملك محمد السادس حفظه الله، مكنت بلادي من التواجد بين أحسن 10 تجارب دولية ناجحة في تصنيف مؤشر أداء التغير المناخ لسنة 2023، ومما يعتبر أيضا حافزا لبلدي للتقدم أكثر في هذا المجال. نحن الآن كبرلمانيين مدعوون أكثر من أي وقت مضى، ليس فقط على سن تشريعات لحماية ومحاربة التغيرات المناخية، ولكن يجب علينا أن نطور من أدائنا نحو أساليب جديدة قادرة على حث حكوماتنا من أجل التفاعل مع كل ما يتم التوقع عليه، وأعتقد بأن هناك آليتين أساسيتين. الآلية الأولى هو تقييم دوري للسياسات العمومية المرتبطة بالتغيرات المناخية، وأعتقد بأن هذا التغيير الدوري هذا التقييم الدوري كفيل لبرلماناتنا بجعل حكوماتنا قادرة على مواصلة العمل من أجل تطبيق كل هذه الاتفاقيات. ثانياً هو دراسة مدى تأثير كل القوانين والتشريعات التي نسنها داخل برلماناتنا، مدى تأثيرها على المعيش اليومي للمواطن، خاصة فيما يخص قضية التغيرات المناخية. وإذا لم تكن هذه القوانين قادرة على أنها تغير من المعطيات المناخية يجب تغييرها بقوانين أخرى. نحن قادرون كبرلمانيين على تغيير السياسات العمومية، ولكن يجب أن تتوفر إرادات حقيقية لدينا ولدى الحكومات ولدى حكوماتنا. شكرا لكم. السلام عليكم.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the speaker from Uzbekistan, to be followed by the speaker from Djibouti.
Assalomu alaykum, muhtarama rais, hurmatli delegatsiyalar rahbarlari, parlament a'zolari, xonimlar va janoblar. Barcha ishtirokchilarni samimiy qutlashga va parlament mezoni bo'yicha juda dolzarb tadbirni tashkil qilgani uchun Birlashgan Arab Amirliklari Federal Milliy Kengashi raisi janob Saqir G'obashga hamda parlamentlar aro ittifoq bosh kotibi janob Martin Chunkonga o'z minnatdorligimizni izhor etishga ijozat bergaysiz. Hurmatli parlament a'zolari, BMT ma'lumotlariga ko'ra iqlim o'zgarishi bizning mamlakatimiz va Markaziy Osiyoning barcha mamlakatlari uchun sezilarli salbiy oqibatlarni keltirib chiqarmoqda. Orol dengizining qurib qolishi va uning qurigan tubida 5,5 million gektardan ortiq maydonda Orolbo'yi mintaqasida qator ekologik va ijtimoiy iqtisodiy muammolarni keltirib chiqarayotgan sho'rlangan Orol qum cho'li paydo bo'lishi bunga ishonchli misol bo'la oladi. Aynan shu bois BMT Bosh Assambleyasi Orol fojiasini hozirgi zamonning global ekologik muammosi sifatida tan oldi. Ta'kidlash joizki, so'nggi yillarda mamlakatimizda ekologiyaga munosabat sezilarli darajada o'zgardi. Prezidentimiz Shavkat Mirziyoyev boshchiligida iqlim o'zgarishi oqibatlarini yumshatish choralari ko'rilmoqda. Yangicha ekologik tafakkur shakllanmoqda. Aholining ekologik madaniyati yuksalmoqda. O'zbekiston parlamentining faol ishtirokida normativ-huquqiy hujjatlar qabul qilindi. Atrof muhitni muhofaza qilish bo'yicha ko'plab xalqaro hujjatlar, shu jumladan iqlim o'zgarishi bo'yicha Parij bitimi ratifikatsiya qilindi. Senatimiz atrof muhitni himoya borasida parlament nazoratini amalga oshirmoqda. Bu sohadagi faoliyatga yoshlar parlamenti va fuqarolik jamiyati vakillari keng jalb qilinmoqda. Yashil makon umummilliy loyihasi amalga oshirilmoqda va uning doirasida yiliga 2 million tub ko'chat ekilmoqda. Biz BMT bosh kotibi Antonio Guterresning kelajak avlod nomidan fikr yuritishimiz va harakat qilishimiz hamda ularning huquq va manfaatlarini hisobga olgan holda qarorlar qabul qilishimiz kerak degan fikrlariga to'liq qo'shilamiz. Qadrli do'stlar, biz O'zbekistonda parlamentlar aro ittifoqning iqlim o'zgarishiga qarshi kurashga qaratilgan sa'y-harakatlarini va tashabbuslarini yuksak darajada qadrlaymiz. Ekologik muammolarning dolzarbligini yanada ko'proq hamjihatlikni, parlamentlar aro hamkorlikni talab qilishini inobatga olib, biz quyidagilarni zarur deb hisoblaymiz. Birinchi, parlamentlar aro ittifoq doirasida iqlim o'zgarishi oqibatlariga qarshi kurashish va kam uglerodlik iqtisodiyotga o'tish bo'yicha parlamentlar aro hamkorlikni mustahkamlash uchun qabul qilingan rezolyutsiyalar, bayonotlar, boshqa hujjatlar ijrosini monitoring qilish hamda tahlil qilishning doimiy mexanizmini yaratish masalasini o'rganish. Ikkinchi, parlamentlar aro ittifoq tomonidan muvofiqlashtirish doirasida bolalar va xotin-qizlarni iqlim o'zgarishi oqibatlaridan himoya qilish, bu bo'yicha xalqaro hujjatni qabul qilish masalasini ko'rib chiqish. Uchinchi, O'zbekiston prezidenti tomonidan taklif qilingan BMT Bosh Assambleyasining Markaziy Osiyo global iqlim tahdidlari qarshisida umumiy farovonlik yo'lida hamjihatlik rezolyutsiyasini qabul qilishni qo'llab-quvvatlash. Hurmatli hamkasblar, fursatdan foydalanib, Birlashgan Arab Amirliklari xalqini milliy bayram, davlat tashkil topgan kun bilan chin qalbimdan tabriklayman. E'tiboringiz uchun rahmat.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the speaker from Djibouti, to be followed by the speaker from Paraguay.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la Fédération du Conseil de la Fédération des Émirats Arabes Unis. Excellence, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général de l'UIP. Avant de passer rapidement au sujet du jour, je voudrais tout d'abord dire l'immense joie qui m'anime pour remercier le Conseil national de la Fédération des Émirats Arabes Unis pour son hospitalité et ses marques d'estime fraternelle dont nous faisons l'objet depuis notre arrivée. Je suis convaincu qu'on nous convient à cette réunion parlementaire en marge de la COP28, le Conseil de la Fédération, l'institution haute comme l'UIP, souhaite nous inscrire dans l'élan planétaire de lutte contre le réchauffement climatique. La République de Djibouti est un parfait exemple d'État subissant des plans fuites et les conséquences des déséquilibres naturels survenus. Les changements climatiques d'une ampleur inégalée mettent à mal la résilience et l'adaptation de nos concitoyens. Ces sécheresses qui s'éternisent, l'érosion côtière due au phénomène mondial de la montée et de l'acidification des eaux de mer, canicules, fortes préoccupations, une tempête de pluie faible et régulière. Telles sont les menaces et risques avec lesquels la République de Djibouti est amenée à y faire face, et ce cycle qui perdure nous oblige à faire évoluer les mentalités et les échanges des pragmatismes lors des mises en place de l'exécution. Mesdames et messieurs, la situation prévalente dans mon pays trouve son origine en grande partie aux émissions des pays industrialisés à gaz à effet de serre, n'étant nullement responsable des causes du réchauffement climatique alors même que nous subissions des plans faits et les effets négatifs, nous avons dû nous adapter et faire plus et mieux malgré nos ressources limitées. La soif et les manques endémiques, mais ces 20 années de la République nous ont retournés vers les énergies renouvelables et durables, l'hydroélectrique, l'énergie géothermique, photovoltaïque, éolienne, ont banni les ressources d'approvisionnement en électricité de consommation. Grâce à cette transition énergétique durable, Djibouti ambitionne de devenir le premier pays africain entièrement alimenté par l'énergie renouvelable. Par ailleurs, Djibouti a mis en place un mécanisme depuis 2013. Je voudrais conclure dans mon intervention sur l'inventaire des stratégies nationales que vous aurez compris. Nous essayons de prendre des initiatives appropriées pour renforcer la résilience et l'adoption face aux challenges et au réchauffement climatique. La route devant nous est encore longue et difficile. Les volontés de partenariats de tout genre pour nous accompagner seront toujours les bienvenues. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I will now give the floor to the Honorable Speaker from Paraguay, to be followed by the Acting President of Pan-African Parliament.
His Excellency Sakar Gobash, Speaker of the Federal Council of the United Arab Emirates. Your Excellencies. Represento a Paraguay, un país cuyo 44% de su superficie está cubierta por bosques. 15% en base a un régimen de área silvestre protegida. Somos 6 millones de habitantes y alimentamos a más de 100 millones de personas alrededor del mundo. En el acuífero guaraní tenemos una de las principales reservas de agua dulce del planeta. Toda nuestra energía eléctrica es generada en base a un sistema de energía renovable y limpia en nuestras hidroeléctricas. Y no solo el 100% de la energía que consumimos es limpia y renovable, sino que exportamos el excedente energético. Sostenemos, defendemos y vivimos en base a un modelo de desarrollo sostenible. Y en ese entendimiento es imperativo que comprendamos la necesidad de cooperar todos juntos con todas las naciones del mundo en base o en la lucha por la preservación de nuestro medio ambiente. Pero tenemos que hacerlo con responsabilidades bien separadas. Las naciones en desarrollo debemos ser reconocidas y debe existir el entendimiento de una situación diferenciada que permita nuestro desarrollo y que no se generen imposiciones unilaterales que no reconozcan nuestro aporte a la conservación del medio ambiente. Tenemos la oportunidad de ser la primera generación que hereda a sus hijos un mundo, un planeta en mejores condiciones del que las encontró. No perdamos esa oportunidad. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for being efficient with time. We will now hear from the last colleague in this segment. This will be the acting president of the Pan-African Parliament. You have the floor.
Excellency, the Speaker of Parliament of Zambia, who is our moderator, His Excellency Honorable Sakir Gobash, Speaker of National Council of United Emirates of Arab, Excellencies, Speakers of National Parliament, Excellencies, Honorable Parliamentarians, I stand before you on behalf of 1.4 billion of Africans. And this message of Africa, I think, deserves more than 3 minutes, Your Excellency. Honorable members, Excellencies, yes, climate change is a major challenge for the world. Yes, we should address it adequately. But again, today, you go and meet any citizens of the world, any citizen of any country. They are more worried about war. They are worried, they are scared of Ukraine-Russian war. They are scared of Palestine-Israel war. World is under threat of nuclear. Why should you allow any citizen of Russia, any citizen of Palestine, any citizen of Israel, any citizen of Ukraine to die? We should not allow. Of course, we were not cause of that war, but we preferred silence. It seems to me we are not living at the expectation of people of the world. Excellencies, can we ask loudly our world superpowers to respect each other and safeguard the world? Can we ask them to stop nuclear competitions and work in the best interest of the world for peace and stability of the world through negotiation, give and take, through creating win-win situations? I know our superpowers don't like to be told. Sorry for that. As the people of the world, as the representative of the world, we need to speak. We need to say. That's our responsibility. We cannot keep quiet. We might pay price for that, but still we need to speak on behalf of the people of the world. Today, you can ask any of us about the challenge of the world. They won't say it's climate. They will say it's war. It's about the war. Let's mitigate this challenge. Let's stand by the people of the world. Otherwise, we will let down the world, Excellencies. Your Excellency, Madam...
Dear colleague, your time is out. If you can wind up, please.
Yes, Honorable. Excellencies, Africa comprises 17% of the world population. We account maybe 4% of world greenhouse gas. But Africa will be the warmest part of the world. We don't deserve that. Why is that? Because of injustice. We were under colony. Our source was looting. Africa was mistreated. Excellencies, it's high time not to leave Africa behind. Let's help Africa Let's stand by Africa. I thank Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Distinguished colleagues, this concludes the high-level panel for Speakers of Parliament. I thank you all for this rich session of experience sharing and look forward to pursuing the exchanges throughout the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
My parliament, my planet.
أدعو أصحاب المعالي والسعادة رؤساء البرلمانات للتفضل لالتقاط الصورة الجماعية. أصحاب السعادة والمعالي، نستكمل البرنامج سوياً. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، أرجو التفضل بمقاعدكم لاستكمال البرنامج.
Well, Australia in the Pacific region deals with climate changes every single day. We know in the Pacific region that action on climate is the #1 priority. We're seeing governments making sure they're being prepared, and we're seeing the impacts of the changing climate. Australia has a diverse and beautiful continent, but the challenges are real as a result of climate. Well, we're leading by example. Every single person needs to take action, whether it be members of the public, members of the parliament, or even speakers of parliament. I know from taking practical action in my own life, in my own home, making sure that I'm doing everything I can to reduce waste, to ensure that we are doing everything that we can. In our parliament in Australia, we have done innovation around lighting, around renewable energy, and of course, decreasing the ongoing waste coming from our parliament, ensuring that we're using water efficiently, and for the first time, the Australian Parliament later this year will be delivering and seeing electrical vehicle charging stations built. The Pacific Islands in particular are small countries that Australia works closely with. Here at the IPU, Australia stands shoulder to shoulder with our small island nation brothers and sisters. No matter how small or how big your country is, your voice needs to be heard here at the IPU right across the world, and that's what Australia is committed to.
أصحاب السعادة والمعالي، ففي ظل الحقائق المتواترة التي نسمعها ونشاهدها حول التغير المناخي وتفاوت مجهودات الدول في محاربة الآثار الضارة لذلك التغير، واختلاف أدوات كل منها في مواجهة هذا الخطر الذي يتهدد به البشرية، أصبح لزاما على جميع الدول أن توحد استجابتها العالمية لتغير المناخ. نحن أمام تحد يتطلب تبادلا مكثفا للخبرات وتداولا مركزا للأفكار وحشد الصفوف لعمليات تمويل تستهدف الدول الأقل حظاً لتشكيل جبهة عمل مشتركة لمواجهة التحديات البيئية. أترككم الآن مع جلسة أعتبرها شخصياً من الأهم في محاكاة النقاط السابقة. الآن جلسة سد الفجوة، النهوض بالعمل المناخي والتكيف مع تغير المناخ لصالح المجتمعات المحلية. أدعو مدير الجلسة السيد إيمانويل مارفو، عضو برلمان غانا ورئيس المجموعة البرلمانية التابعة لمنتدى البلدان المعرضة لخطر تغير المناخ، بالإضافة إلى أعضاء فريق النقاش للبدء بالجلسة.
Thank you very much. Honorable speakers and distinguished parliamentarians, it's a pleasure for me to join this parliamentary meeting to moderate this session on bridging the gap, advancing climate action and adaptation for vulnerable communities. As we know, it is those least responsible for climate change that pay the biggest price. The importance of adaptation for the most vulnerable who are already grappling with the effects of climate change is undeniable. In this session, we're going to look at opportunities and challenges for giving equal priority to mitigation and adaptation, and discuss options for scaling up adaptation financing so it reaches those most in need, especially in countries on the front lines of climate change. We're going to hear from members of parliament from 3 different continents to understand the realities of climate change on the ground around the world. They will share with us how climate change is affecting the most vulnerable in their countries and the associated adaptation strategies they experience. In the last session, we plan to have time for delegates to also take the floor. For want of time, we will limit that to 5 members, and I'll kindly ask that those of you who would like to have a bite should show by hand and fill a form that will be available from the Secretariat. And then I will kindly ask that you limit your intervention to maximum 2 minutes. So I'd like to now welcome the first panelist, Mr. Sabah Chowdhury, who is a Member of Parliament of Bangladesh. He is also the Prime Minister's Special Envoy to climate change, as well as Honorary IPU President. Mr. Chowdhury, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Mafo, and very good afternoon to Excellencies, fellow parliamentarians, members of the panel that's assembled here today. I'm not going to follow a script and read out. Let me just share a few thoughts for you on the importance of COP28. We, of course, meet at a time when the window on getting things right is closing rapidly. We talk about a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. We are actually heading for 3 degrees Celsius. We are talking about emissions peaking by 2025, by our emissions being reduced by 43% by 2030, 60% by 2035 to achieve net zero in 2050. We are nowhere near the target. And the continuum of mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage is something which is very clear to all of us. The lesser the temperature rise, the more effective our adaptation. And the more effective the adaptation, the lesser the burden on loss and damage. And we are all aware of how the UNFCCC discourse started off. Initially, we looked at mitigation for the first 10 years. Then we realized we were not doing enough. and people were hurting. Then we looked at adaptation for the next 10. And now coming to the 10 years thereafter, we see that we have not done enough of mitigation and adaptation, so we are talking about loss and damage. We can talk about gaps in many contexts. There is a funding gap, there is an ambition gap, there is an emissions gap. So gaps are all over the place. But to us as parliamentarians, I feel the most important gap that we have to bridge is the global solidarity gap. There is a complete lack of trust between the parties of the UNFCCC in the COP. So we as parliamentarians need to restore that trust. We need to build bridges, because otherwise whatever we try and do is not going to work. If we are not able to control temperatures, then how much adaptation can we do? There are natural limits to adaptation. There are natural limits to resilience. So mitigation is important. Of course, funding for adaptation is important. But what we as parliamentarians should be doing are really essentially two things, other than, of course, the global solidarity. First is to hold our governments to account for commitments that they are making. Each country has a NDC, a nationally determined contribution. What are we as parliamentarians doing to ensure that our governments are acting to meet those NDC commitments? What are we doing to allocate more resources? What are we doing to ensure that whatever resources are available are in fact spent in an optimal way? So the role for parliamentarians is huge. We of course have the issue of renewable energy. So on the one hand, we have to phase out fossil fuels. On the other hand, we have to triple renewable energy. By 2030, we have to double our energy efficiency. And this whole agenda of climate change is too big. It is too big an agenda for governments to handle alone. Quite often we talk about all of government, all of society approaches. Parliamentarians are the bridge between the society that they represent and the government whose allocations they control, whose laws they formulate, whose policies they articulate. So this is in fact a great opportunity for us to, as parliamentarians, to act. In Bangladesh, we see climate change not just as another crisis. It is an existential crisis. How we live, whether we will live, all depends on this. And as we go beyond planetary boundaries, the danger is increasing. I was just listening to the statement from the, I believe it was a Pan-African Parliament, and he was talking about wars. You know where the greatest war is? The greatest war is the war that we are waging against nature. And that war has to stop. We have to live in harmony with nature, not in constant conflict. So if we as parliamentarians can scale up, as I often say, there is no planet B, there is only one planet. So we need to get it right, and there is no opportunity to try again. I hope that we will all take this matter with the utmost seriousness that it deserves. What is our role, after all, as parliamentarians? It is to ensure the safety, the security, and the welfare of the people that we represent. It is about sustainable livelihoods. It is about protecting them and keeping them out of harm's way. I thank IPU for this arrangement. Every year when we have a COP, IPU is there, and it's an absolute delight to be here at an event which is being hosted by the Federal National Council. When I was president of the IPU, I'm very familiar with the very vibrant relationship that we have had. FNC is a great partner, and I hope this partnership, not just with the FNC, but all of the other national parliaments around the world, is going to continue. I wish you all a very successful COP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chowdhury, for those insightful remarks. I want to say that the list is closed. We are oversubscribed beyond the 5 that we said. And so just take note of that, please. Now, I have the pleasure to pass the floor to Ms. Catherine Henning-Berger, who is a member of the German Bundestag. Ms. Henning-Berger, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and to speak with you all. First of all, I also want to say that we are now on a critical point that we have to take a decision to phase out fossil fuel together worldwide. Because if we reach our tipping points in the climate system, if we miss the 1.5 degrees, all will be lost. So everything is on stake, and I'm very happy to work with you together to phase out fossil fuel in our country, in your country. Together we can achieve a just transition. But also, the climate crisis is already a cruel reality, especially in the countries of the Global South, especially by those who have not caused the climate crisis. And as a member of the German Parliament, an industrialized country, it is my duty also to say that of course we as industrialized nation, we have a historic responsibility. And this is also why Germany has given 100 million in the beginning at this COP to the Loss and Damage Fund. And this is very, very important for us because we have to achieve this fund. And the access, especially for communities from the Global South, especially also for communities, for indigenous people, they need to have direct access to this money. Also, the climate crisis is a cruel reality also in my home region, in Germany. There was 2021, there was a huge flood in the small village called Altal, and more than 100 people lost their lives. Also, our warning system failed us. Our politicians failed us. We had not achieved a climate adaptation strategy in this area. And the weather is also rapidly changing in our region. So also we have to adapt to the climate crisis, to weather extremes. But also, and there is the huge privilege, we had the money to give to the people, to the communities, to build their homes again. But still it was not enough. Still the people in the small village Ahrtal, so most of them are struggling, most of them are traumatized. And so I think it's also very important if we talk about climate adaptation, if we talk about loss and damage, we also have to talk about the health of the people, of the trauma of the people, if they live through weather extremes. And also there's one point that's very important for me, that's the role of the woman. Because right now, women are the most, they are the hardest hit by the climate crisis. They are the most vulnerable to the climate crisis, not because they are weaker than men, just because they are not fairly included in decision-making structures. So for a just adaptation, it's very important to include women equally on every political level, also in society. And so I'm looking forward to discuss with you how we can manage together a just transformation and also a just adaptation to the climate crisis already happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Catherine. So now we will take the last panelist, who is in the person of Mr. Issa Mardo Jabir, a member of Parliament, a member of the Transitional National Council of Chad. Mr. Jabir.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Moi, je voudrais axer mon intervention sur 4 points et qui va traiter de cette question en lien avec les pays du lac Tchad et du Sahel. Comme vous le savez, le lac Tchad est le 4e grand lac d'Afrique en termes de superficie après les lacs Victoria, Tanganyika et Nyassa. Et il est situé dans la région du Sahel oriental et qui constitue une vaste étendue de ressources partagées par le Cameroun, la République centrafricaine, le Tchad, le Niger, le Nigeria et la Libye. Alors, le bassin du lac Tchad abrite une population croissante qui a un besoin urgent de faire face aux effets du changement climatique sur les ressources en eau et les écosystèmes du bassin. Il fournit à environ 47 millions de personnes une gamme variée de services environnementaux, principalement des services d'approvisionnement, c'est-à-dire en nourriture et eau, de soutien des cycles des terres et des nutriments, de régulation, reconstitution des eaux souterraines, séquestration du carbone, purification de l'air et des services culturels, des loisirs, spiritualité, éducation. Et donc la relation entre les ressources environnementales, les moyens de subsistance et les conflits a été établie depuis très longtemps dans la région du lac Tchad. Maintenant, c'est le problème qu'il faut maintenant évoquer. C'est la dégradation croissante des ressources en eau et des écosystèmes. Donc c'est encore exacerbé par les problèmes de sécurité actuels et de la migration subséquente du bétail et des personnes à la recherche de vie, des moyens de subsistance plus sûrs. Les chocs climatiques et les événements extrêmes dans la région tels que les épisodes de sécheresse et les fortes précipitations pourraient devenir plus fréquents et plus graves. Associés à ces changements, d'autres défis comme l'extrême pauvreté, les conflits, la croissance démographique accélérée, l'exploitation irrationnelle des ressources naturelles, les conflits, l'extrémisme violent rendent plus vulnérables les populations de la région. Les effets du changement climatique et la variabilité climatique ont entraîné une augmentation des conflits intercommunautaires, des migrations des populations et des pénuries alimentaires, rendant la vie difficile à des populations déjà vulnérables. Les catastrophes liées au climat sont devenues plus fréquentes et plus catastrophiques ces dernières années et devraient s'aggraver dans la région. Donc il faut parler aussi des déplacements et ce qui détruit les moyens de subsistance et compromet le développement économique. Alors je vais illustrer un peu mon intervention par quelques exemples. En 2021, il était estimé que près de 29 millions de Sahéliens auront besoin d'une aide humanitaire. Au Tchad, il y a quelques années, après une grave sécheresse dans la province du lac, plusieurs familles ont été obligées de déménager. Depuis 2008, près de 800 000 personnes ont été déplacées au Tchad en raison des catastrophes liées au climat. Et donc, en moyenne, les femmes des zones rurales de la région du lac Tchad marchent 6 km par jour pour aller chercher de l'eau, bien que certaines, la distance sont beaucoup plus longues. Les inondations aussi sont également devenues plus fréquentes depuis les années 90. Les fortes précipitations de 2012 et récemment de 2022 ont provoqué de vastes inondations dans beaucoup de villes et entraîné des déplacements de millions de personnes dans la région. La perturbation d'exploitation des parcours pastoraux et agricoles entraîne des conflits entre agriculteurs et éleveurs, et les exemples sont là quand on prend l'exemple du Tchad. En outre, les populations du bassin du lac Tchad sont prises au piège de l'insécurité et de l'extrémisme violent créés par les groupes armés non étatiques de Boko Haram qui ont obligé 2,5 millions de personnes à quitter leur foyer. Maintenant, puisque c'est une rencontre entre parlementaires, je voudrais parler de ça. Et en lien avec le bassin du lac Tchad, vous avez la commission du bassin du lac Tchad a été créée le 22 mai 1964 par les États membres pour assurer la gestion du lac et des ressources en eau partagées, la préservation des écosystèmes et la promotion de l'intégration régionale, de la paix, de la sécurité et du développement dans la région du lac Tchad. Les parlementaires doivent user de leur pouvoir pour soutenir les populations et notamment les plus vulnérables qui sont confrontés à ces risques cumulés en s'appuyant sur l'expérience du lac, mais aussi du Sahel. Alors, qu'est-ce que les parlementaires doivent faire? D'abord, d'une manière générale, c'est vraiment coopérer avec les associations des droits humains, mais aussi les autres acteurs pour recueillir davantage de données et contributions sur les réalités du terrain et proposer des dispositions pour résoudre des points programmatiques dans la législation et les politiques publiques. Également, encourager le gouvernement à prendre en compte la situation de vulnérabilité des populations. Il faut agir sur le budget de l'État pour la prise en compte de cette vulnérabilité. Organiser des contrôles périodiques par les interpellations aussi des questions et organiser des activités de sensibilisation et autres. Et par rapport aux parlementaires du lac Tchad, il faut maintenant adopter la charte de l'eau et voir comment elle sera mise en œuvre dans les États membres. Alors, pour conclure, je dirais que le changement climatique est une menace existentielle pour les populations du bassin du lac Tchad et chaque jour, nous sommes témoins de son impact sur les personnes les plus vulnérables, les communautés d'agriculteurs et d'éleveurs. Et je pense qu'il est temps de rectifier le tir, que les mêmes priorités soient enfin accordées aux efforts d'adaptation que ceux d'atténuation. Ceci est très important. Les solutions fondées sur la nature, portées sur les communautés locales, doivent être mises à l'échelle. Ceci est très important. Et les groupes vulnérables, en particulier les femmes, les enfants et les personnes déplacées, doivent être au centre de ces efforts. Par conséquent, le nouveau fonds pour les pertes et dommages doit aussi nous être accessible pour penser les blessures causées par les années de catastrophes climatiques. Il est important d'associer aux activités de résilience climatique celles de consolidation de la paix et de la cohésion sociale pour un développement durable de la région. Le temps presse, des vies sont en jeu. Nous devons unir nos forces pour que l'adaptation au changement climatique dans les pays vulnérables soit le fer de lance de l'action climatique. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jabir, for sharing your thoughts on the Chad situation with us. So I think now we can take some interventions from the floor. The Secretariat has microphones. The first speaker, the first intervention will be taken from the Speaker of South Africa, Honorable Marisa. You may hand over the mic to her. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. The South African Parliament, let me start by acknowledging all speakers, chairpersons, and heads of delegations. The South African Parliament welcomes the opportunity to participate in this important discussion. The theme of this segment is timely and relevant to the current circumstances where most countries find themselves vulnerable due to socio-economic hardships of climate change. It is therefore our conviction that parliaments gathered at the COP28 will do everything possible to complement the efforts of governments in combating the negative effects of climate change. In doing so, our parliament wishes to reiterate the sentiments echoed by our President, His Excellency, Honorable Cyril Ramaphosa, when addressing the opening segment of COP28. To applaud, which was, he called for people to applaud the landmark decision to operationalize the new fund on loss and damage. We therefore welcome the pledge of $100 billion on climate financing. Chairperson, the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa endorses fund mobilization priority for underdeveloped countries and economies for them to recover their infrastructural loss and damage as a result of climate change. We also add our voice in calling for multilateralism to prevail in global climate change operations. The introduction of the carbon adjustment measures by the EU undermines equity and the development of trade initiative. It can be detrimental and discriminatory in outlook towards the struggling economies, particularly on developing and underdeveloped countries. Our role as representatives of our people cannot be overemphasized in rendering the oversight responsibility of this fund. This, amongst others, will encompass the monitoring of the use of funds during the implementation processes by government and ensuring regular reporting as part of accountability. Recently, our Parliament passed the Disaster Management Act, which provides the framework for an integrated and coordinating disaster management policy focused on prevention, mitigation, emergency, preparedness, rapid and effective response, and post-disaster recovery. The National Assembly recently passed the Climate Change Bill, which is now with the National Council of Provinces. As I conclude, I wish to assure this forum that climate change action remains key to South Africa's sustainable development agenda, and our commitment to take every action that seeks to alleviate the negative impact of climate change. I heard Program Director, the professor earlier on, talking on the power of science. And I also heard a young lady from Mexico expressing a word on the importance of collective conscience. And in that context, I would like to say, Honorable Chair and honorable members, it is my view that global emissions and their impact thereof on climate change is one of the critical areas which we need to look into. And I'm raising this in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war. I'm raising it in the context of the developments in the Gaza area. The regular shelling and bombing must definitely, the emissions must have a negative impact and contribute to the challenges of what we are dealing with today. And therefore, that issue of collective concern should be one of the issues that we discuss and encompass in the decisions that we take. The silencing of the guns, which is what the African Union took a decision on, which we continue to strive for, should be another matter which forms part of the discussions on climate change. Because once we silence the guns, there are no wars, there will be no weapons, there will be no bombing, no shelling, and therefore there can be less emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next intervention will be taken from Cyprus. If you can kindly show where you are so we can locate you. Okay. The next, so after Cyprus, we will take Honorable Zon from Indonesia. So just stand prepared. Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Humanity has been in war with nature for the last 100 years, and now we are paying the cost of this war. I come from an island in the Mediterranean, and now, I mean, the last decade, we are seeing the results of climate change, mega fires, rise of temperature. We are in danger of desertification. Governments should take responsibility, and as parliamentarians, I think that it's about time that we force our governments, when they come home from summits like this, to implement the promises they give. And we should take care as Europeans, as people from around the world, take responsibility for the mess we created. Because I think developed countries and petrol-producing countries created this crisis, and we should take into account future generations. We should think about intergenerational justice, and we should take responsibility and really help vulnerable communities. And when I say vulnerable communities, I mean people coming from poor countries, and particularly minorities and women. Women are suffering enough inequalities in this world. I think they should be helped and not be left behind. We cannot save humanity unless we save everybody. We managed to exterminate millions of species. Now we are at threat. And I urge all my colleagues to go back, find out what their prime ministers and their presidents pledged, and make them fulfill these pledges. We need budgetary lines for prevention, but also not to leave anybody behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Son. So I'll take the next intervention from the Honorable Dinica from Romania. Romania, if you could show by hand. Okay. No, he's from Indonesia. The one who just put.
No, this is.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I'll take Indonesia first before Romania.
Well, thank you, Honorable Chair. Many people of vulnerable groups in Indonesia, women, indigenous people, the poor, and those living in rural areas, as well as in other developing nations, work in the informal sector, which is very dependent on agriculture and plantation products. So climate change, which triggers natural disasters such as floods, heat waves, and extended droughts, poses great risks, not only for livelihood, but also the lives of these people. So adaptation and mitigation in Indonesia inextricably linked, as continuous fast deforestation not only exacerbates the effects of climate change, but also limits the adaptation alternatives accessible to vulnerable population. To that purpose, the Indonesian House of Representatives is also deliberating a draft bill on climate change, which is included in national legislation program of current parliamentary terms. And Indonesia has also made strategic efforts to reduce emissions and mitigate the impacts of climate change through, among other things, committed to generating new and renewable energy to achieve national energy security, with renewable energy accounting for 23% of national energy mix in 2025 and 31% of national energy mix in 2050. Land clearing permission moratorium to protect 66 million hectares of forests and peatlands, mangrove rehabilitation of up to 600,000 hectares is expected by the end of 2024. Deforestation levels fell to their lowest point in 2020, and also 115,000 hectares. So reducing forest fires to 290,000 hectares by 2020, and down from 2.6 million hectares in 2015 and 1.6 million hectares in 2019. So this is, I think, so far our efforts and achievement in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you. The next intervention will be taken from Romania and then Kenya. Romania, now you can have your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues. Romania remains fully engaged in implementing the international legal framework, and we have passed several climate laws, and we are in the process of adopting 2 strategies to adapt to the climate change and GSC reduction. We also are fully aware of the fact that climate change mitigation and adaptation generate challenges, but also opportunities for a green transition. At the level of the Parliament, the main role is to ensure that climate transition processes are fair, benefit all citizens, and do not exacerbate social and economic inequalities, as many of my previous speakers today said. For the vulnerable citizens, Romania, in this context, is doing new support and financial instruments with a strong focus on human capital. This means education, skill building, and reskilling are critical in preparing the next generation for green jobs. We also hosted at Bucharest the largest event in the Central and Eastern Europe in October with 1,500 participants from NGOs and industry and various stakeholders that gathered together to talk about solutions to mitigate the climate change. And the most important thing, I think, is the fact that we also extended this space of decision and stakeholders to the level of the universities, because we all need science-based solutions. So many of these gatherings took place in the universities. And also the children and youth are very concerned in my country about the impact of the climate change. And this is a good thing, because they are very eager to engage in the climate action. We need to empower them and give them opportunities to meaningfully participate in our efforts to mitigate the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind us that we can keep our interventions to 2 minutes to enable us to have more interventions. So Kenya is next, and then from Kenya we'll go to Croatia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in September 2023, Kenya hosted the inaugural Africa Climate Summit. On the sidelines, the Kenyan Parliament, in partnership with the Climate Vulnerable Forum, hosted members from 20 African parliaments to deliberate on their role in oversight of the Convention, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. Mr. Chair, we registered concern on the missed opportunity of carbon credits in developing countries, noting that the price and rules for carbon trading are still unregulated, and the players and referees wear the same kit. Mr. Chair, it is emerging that the big boys in the Polluters League are reluctant to take ambitious domestic action to reduce their emissions, and instead prefer to net off using carbon offsets from African forests and rangelands. This is done under the guise of ITMOs under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, but is in reality a new form of carbon colonialism. Mr. Chair, you cannot oversight what you don't understand. In Nairobi, we stressed on the need for parliaments to invest in capacity building on matters climate. Whereas funds for capacity building for MPs exist under the GCF, very high barriers have been erected, and these funds have not met their stated objectives. We hope that the Loss and Damage Fund will not have a similar architecture. We noted, Mr. Chair, that the Paris Agreement and other climate treaties form part of the laws of most countries, yet they continue to be treated as suggestions rather than law. We therefore supported calls to make violations of these laws justiciable, and we note that this jurisprudence is under consideration at the ICJ. Finally, Mr. Chair, as MPs, we must ensure that indigenous and vulnerable communities are not exploited by the same laws that we pass, and I hope that at this COP28, we shall continue to fight for our space as a proverbial camel. We have put our head in the green tent, and we hope that at the next COP, we shall be in the blue zone at COP29. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your intervention. I take Croatia, and after Croatia, the federal state of Micronesia. Okay. So, Croatia, you may take the floor.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Croatia, a small country in the Mediterranean from which I come, is the third among the EU countries most exposed to the impact of climate change. It emits just 0.05% of the total global CO2 emissions annually, but the warming trend in Croatia is significantly faster than the global average. Despite its shares of responsibility, it feels the consequences of climate change profoundly, and like all countries in the world, it does not have a bright future ahead yet. The main culprit for the current situation is the global economic system, a system that, while creating prosperity for some, leaves many others in insecurity, hunger, and poverty. The only way out is to transform the economic system. We need an economy that reduces the ecological impact of the global economy to a sustainable level, which is distributed evenly among the nations. No one will escape the consequences of climate change. Rich countries may absorb the consequences more easily, but climate change does not recognize borders, ceasefires, and there is no political agreement with them. Therefore, we need to put all our strength and knowledge into the policies which will prevent further warming and mitigate the consequences. Above all, this is, and we should say loud and clear here in Dubai, reducing of use of fossil fuels. We must be brave and determined in green transformation. We must bear the burden of change in solidarity with the rich supporting the poor. We are facing the greatest challenge in world history. Only unity, solidarity, and wealth redistribution are the right and effective response. They are the imperative for the survival of the world. One of the greatest poets, Croatian poets, Tin Ujević, prophetically said in this poem, "The hour of belated knowledge." I'm warning you, the hour of truth and reckoning will come. All there is will be bare. All there is will be clear, yet it will be all too late. We, the parliamentarians of the world, must not allow it to be too late. In this fight, we must find the unity, or there will be none of us. Dear colleagues, we can do it, and we must do it. And I firmly hope, on behalf of the future generations, that we will do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the Honorable Member Lawrence from Micronesia. After him, we will go to Yemen.
Mr. Chair, distinguished guests, I am Quincy Lawrence. I'm the floor leader of the Federated States of Micronesia National Congress, an ocean state where water represents 97% of our territory. I am from the state of Pohnpei, one of our federation's 4 states, which are Yap, Kosrae, Chuk, and Pohnpei. I express my gratitude for the opportunity to address this esteemed assembly of parliamentarians and extend my thanks to the organizers as well. It is heartening to see small island developing states like mine, Tuvalu and Tonga, at the forefront of climate change, being granted a meaningful voice in this forum. The genesis of this advocacy traces back to the conversations between my colleagues from Micronesia and the Pacific Islands, and Secretary General John Gang during last year's IPU meeting in the margins of COP27 in Egypt. It was there that he acknowledged the crucial need for MPs from small island developing states to have their voices heard. To ensure that our voice is fully heard in this forum, it would be great to see the language sits reflected in our outcome statement that we adopt at the end of today. To stress that SIDS are among the most affected by climate change. Today I want to talk about the real impact of climate change in our everyday lives. It's not something far away. We experience it daily. We deal with it. We deal with higher sea levels causing problems like floods on important roads, including the one to our airport in my home island. Houses near the coast are in danger because the rising seas are quickly washing away our shores. It's a serious and urgent situation we face. Finally, I'd like to stress the importance of access to funds for us. To address both economic and non-economic loss and damage we face. Therefore, we welcome the announcement of funds made available to that purpose at the opening of this COP. I thank you for your kind attention and look forward to engaging in further discussion with you, fellow parliamentarians. Kailangan.
Thank you. We'll now take Yemen to be followed by Italy. Yemen.
شكرا جزيلا للرئاسة وللمتحدثين. أنا اسمي علي حسين، رئيس الوفد البرلماني اليمني. وفي البداية سعيد جدا بما تحقق اليوم أن يكون للبرلمانيين ضمن المنطقة الخضراء، وهذه جهود طيبة ومشكورة للمجلس الوطني في دولة الإمارات واللجنة المنظمة. وتوصيتي في بداية كلمتي لأمين عام الاتحاد البرلمان الدولي وللاتحاد البرلمان الدولي ألا نتنازل في المؤتمرات القادمة عما تحقق في هذا المؤتمر. لا يجب أن يكون البرلمانيين على الهامش وأن يكون اجتماعهم اجتماع هامشي فقط. نحن صناع قرار. الاتفاقيات والبروتوكولات وملحقاتها وكل ما يمكن أن يكون في المناخ لا يمكن أن يمر إلا عبر البرلمانات. فما تحقق في كوب 28 يجب ألا يتنازل عنه الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي في المؤتمرات القادمة. هذه توصية. الأمر الآخر، نحن في الجمهورية اليمنية في قلب أحداث التغيرات المناخية. ضربت الجمهورية اليمنية في محافظة المهرة في شهر أكتوبر الإعصار المداري تيج الذي نجم عنه أحداث كبيرة جدا دمرت البنية التحتية بأكملها في محافظة مهمة جدا على البحر العربي. وفعلا نحن نفتقد إلى صندوق التعويضات، نفتقد إلى التدخل السريع، نفتقد إلى الاستشاريين، نفتقد إلى أن يكون الحديث ما أدري الأخ الأمين العام، أنا أكدت على أنه ما حصل اليوم من أن يكون كوب 28 للبرلمانيين في المنطقة الخضراء ألا يتنازل الاتحاد البرلمان الدولي في المؤتمرات القادمة عما تحقق في تصنيف وتوصيف دور البرلمانيين في كل مؤتمرات المناخ. فأرجو من الاتحاد البرلماني لأنه وضع السماعة، أنا أؤكد على أنه ما تحقق بواسطة المجلس الوطني الإماراتي ألا نتنازل عنه. الأمر الآخر، نحن في اليمن في قلب الأحداث، نحن كل سنة نتعرض إلى إعصار مداري يدمر بنيتنا التحتية، لا نلقى أي تعويضات، لا نستفيد من صندوق التعويض. أعتقد بأنه لازلنا وجميع الحاضرين يلاحظ بأننا نعيد نفس الإسطوانة. الدول التي تصنع التغيرات والدول المتأثرة بالمتغيرات، فجوات التمويل وتصويف أو توصيف وتصنيف الدول المتأثرة من الأشد تضررا من الأشد احتياجا. صندوق التعويضات لا يلتزم الدول الغنية الذي تؤدي إلى التلوث، فمصيبتها من جهتين، هي صانعة التلوث وهي التي لا تفي بالتزاماتها لصندوق التعويضات. وكل سنة نكرر نفس الكلام. وما أدري إن كان من سؤال نوجهه إلى الرئاسة وإلى المتحدثين، ما الذي أودى بكوب 27 إلى كاد أن يفشل في لحظاته الأخيرة؟ 12 يوم يستمر الحديث، لكن في آخر اللحظات كل دولة غنية ومسببة للانبعاث الحراري وعليها الالتزامات لا تفي بالتزاماتها. أختم كلامي بأن أزكي ما طرحته السيدة البرلمانية عن جنوب أفريقيا فيما يخص غزة وأطفال غزة ونساء غزة. يجب أن يتوقف الحرب، ويجب أن يكون للعالم صحو الضمير بأن تتوقف الحرب في غزة انتصارا للأطفال وللنساء ولهذا الشعب الذي يتعرض للإبادة. وأحييك سيدتي الفاضلة من جنوب أفريقيا وأحييكم جميعا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Thank you very much, Yemen. We'll now go to Italy, and after that we will take Vietnam.
Grazie. Il governo italiano promuove l'accordo di Parigi, puntando a valorizzare quelle che sono le buone pratiche di tanti stakeholder impegnati nella mitigazione e nell'adattamento al cambiamento climatico. Qui ci siamo impegnati a contribuire con 100 miliardi di dollari l'anno per il funzionamento delle perdite e dei danni e finanziarle. Abbiamo coinvolto le giovani generazioni per i negoziati sul clima. E qui siamo anche a proporre di aggiungere al documento finale, al punto 5, dove chiediamo delle strategie climatiche inclusive ed eque che riconoscano le esigenze di popolazioni diverse, anche reclamando dei ruoli di leadership per le donne giovani nell'azione del clima. Noi vorremmo aggiungere, prevedendo delle strategie per la tutela delle donne e dei bambini, perché sono le prime vittime dei danni del cambiamento climatico. Questa purtroppo non è una ideologia green. Devo ripeterlo perché a volte si sente dire, purtroppo è la realtà. E tutti qui stiamo a dire quelli che sono i problemi nei nostri paesi. La transizione ecologica che dobbiamo attuare è semplicemente poter prevenire e insieme, uniti, essere attori di un cambiamento necessario. Non stiamo combattendo un modello economico, stiamo solo cercando di non fare sempre gli stessi errori. Altrimenti non avremo un futuro. La nostra comunità globale deve preservare il capitale naturale, abbattere le emissioni climalteranti, per poter portare avanti anche un modello economico, perché deve essere sostenibile, circolare, ma soprattutto deve essere inclusivo. La sostenibilità sociale e quella economica e ambientale vanno insieme, non viaggiano su binari differenti. Se possiamo riuscire a risolvere una, risolveremo anche l'altra. Quindi io sono qui a pregarvi, utilizzo questo termine, a pregarvi perché cerchiamo di far capire a tutti i nostri governi, anche al nostro il primo, che l'unica direzione è quella di lavorare insieme. L'unica direzione è quella che ci dice Papa Francesco. Nessuno si salva da solo. Siamo tutti sulla stessa barca. Grazie.
Muchas gracias. So we now go to Vietnam, and after Vietnam, Thailand. And Greece will be the last. Vietnam.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, the fight against climate change cannot be done by any single country. The Vietnam delegation would like to share some views on parliamentary cooperation. First, promoting parliamentary action responding to climate change through a global and all-people-based approach and uphold multilateralism with the motto of common but developed responsibility, justice, and resilience with socio-economic development demand and of developing countries take into account. Second, promoting governments to establish an inclusive cooperation mechanism and capitalizing on strength of both developed country capital, technology, and developing one's markets, resources. Third, preparedness climate finance should be promoted in a way that makes it more accessible, does not increase the debt burden, and not at the expense of resources for realizing other development goals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now we take Thailand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable colleagues, we are from Thailand, and we would like to point out that Thailand, as the world's leading food producer and exporter, and we have been affected by the global climate change and El Nino, especially in the area of food security, tourism, and water resources management. And that is why climate change is now at the top of Parliament of Thailand's priority. We also work very hard to let everyone to be a part of this process. We fully support the UN Secretary General's acceleration agenda, aiming to urgently bring forward net zero timelines closer to 2050 and support the life balance of mitigation and adaptation. We do hope that this parliamentary meeting in COP28 will be an important milestone for climate empowerment for IPU members and strengthening immediately in this global response to the climate emergency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Greece.
Distinguished guests, COP28, among the other commitments, underscores the commitment of global parliaments to environmental concerns, aligning legislative actions with global climate goals, and enhancing the role of legislators in tackling environmental challenges. The Adaptation Gap Report 2023 shows a growing divide between need and action when it comes to protecting from climate extremes. Action to protect people and nature is more pressing than ever, as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in his message on the report. It is true that we are in an adaptation emergency and steps must be taken to close the adaptation gap, particularly to cut greenhouse gas emissions and increase adaptation efforts to protect vulnerable populations. The new Loss and Damage Fund will also be an important instrument to mobilize resources by more innovative financing mechanisms to reach the necessary scale of investments. Greece's main goal is to strengthen efforts at a global level for climate-resistant and sustainable development, which will hold the temperature increase to 1.5 Celsius degree. These efforts take into account the scientific findings that drastic and immediate reductions in emissions, combined with implementation of actions to adapt to unavoidable climate change, is the decade will reduce the devastating effects of climate change on human and ecosystems. As Greek minister stressed in his opening remark, Greece's records are of the best among the European countries, and we in Greece are committed to work even harder to that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're about closing. Before I give the panelists 1 minute each to wrap up, there's one last request from the African Parliamentarians Climate Action Network Chair from Uganda. Jacqueline, can you have 1 minute to make your intervention, and then we go back to the panelists.
Okay, thank you so much. Chair, my name is Jacqueline Amongin from Uganda, and I chair the Africa Parliamentarians Network on Climate Action. I'm very excited to have heard all the presentations that were taking place here. But as take-homes for members of parliament, I think it's important that we appreciate the Paris Agreement and the commitments that were made in the NDCs that all our member states committed to, and ensuring that we commit member states to actually implement the commitments within Paris agreements. And also within our different climate regional networks, we had the Africa Climate Summit where the parliamentarians came up with aggressive communique in terms of implementing their legislative framework. I think what is lacking is how do we as members of parliament take up the legislative gaps within our member states so that we are able to close the gaps in terms of the commitments that are made at the global level, especially commitment to climate financing, commitment now. Last year we agreed on loss and damage. This year we are putting in place mechanisms for loss and damage fund. How are these funds able to trickle down to our climate vulnerable countries like Uganda? In a nutshell, Chair, I would also like to emphasize the fact that despite the global commitments, very little money goes to the climate vulnerable countries, especially Africa, which constitutes almost which receives all the shocks in terms of climate and contributes just less than 4%. I think it's time for parliaments to take aggressive action wherever you are, to stand up, to be counted, because this is an accountability summit and we have to be accountable in terms of our legislative modus operandi. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for that intervention. And so I'll call Ms. Catherine from Bundestag to give us
Thank you for all your worth and your wisdom. I listened carefully, and thank you for your inputs. We, as member of the parliament, have the huge privilege that we can speak to our governments directly and that we can take together decisions in our parliaments. And so, as industrialized nations, of course, it's our duty to provide with the money for adaptation and also for loss and damage. Germany gives more than 6 billion in climate finance, and from that, there are 3 billion for climate adaptation. But I know, of course, this is not enough. At the same time, other industrialized nations pay far less than us. So I think it's also very important that all of the industrial nations need to scale up their climate finance. So I call on my colleagues from other industrialized nations to take up their responsibility to give more money for adaptation, but also to pay into the loss and damage fund. Also, secondly, it's very important that we hold the private sector accountable, especially the fossil fuel companies in oil, gas and coal. Also there must pay into adaptation measures and also into the loss and damage fund. And this is like an invitation, especially for the fossil fuel industry, to take responsibility here. And I want to thank you also my colleague from Uganda who pointed out that there is a huge difference in who has access to the finance. So it's very important that in loss and damage, and also in adaptation measures, that especially the communities who are most affected by the climate crisis, that they have more access, direct access to the funds. I think this is the key also for a climate just finance system, and also, of course, it's very important to have a gender-just strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, those were excellent words to conclude. So I'll give the last floor to Chad.
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. En suivant les différents intervenants dans la salle, c'est qu'il y a eu une prise de conscience de beaucoup d'acteurs qui interviennent et les parlementaires en première position. Je crois qu'en tant que parlementaires, nous devrions prendre conscience de la situation et de la vulnérabilité de nos pays, surtout pour nous, pays sahéliens, et de surcroît les pays du bassin du lac Tchad. Je crois qu'on a un rôle important à jouer, d'où la solidarité au niveau national, régional, mais aussi international, ce qui suppose une coopération internationale efficace pour relever ces défis-là. D'être regardant en tant que parlementaire, d'être regardant sur cette question de vulnérabilité. Les femmes, les enfants, les déplacés. Quand je prends l'exemple du Tchad aujourd'hui, nous accueillons un nombre très important de réfugiés, de déplacements internes. Donc, ce problème-là sans coopération au niveau national, au niveau régional et au niveau international, on ne peut pas vraiment le relever. Et autre chose, il faut accorder la même priorité à l'adaptation, mais aussi à l'atténuation. Les deux doivent aller ensemble pour justement répondre aux différents défis que nous rencontrons. Je crois que ceci est très important et moi je pense qu'avec une solidarité agissante, on peut relever ces défis-là. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we end this session. Time is not on our side. Thank you very much for participating. I understand that in the afternoon session, there may be opportunities for those who didn't get a chance to also make some interventions. So thank you very much. Maybe we can do a better applause for the panelists as they leave the stage. Thank you very much.
Mi Parlamento, mi planeta. Soy Sofía Carvajal, soy presidenta del Grupo Latinoamericano de la Unión Interparlamentaria y diputada federal de México. Bueno, el cambio climático definitivamente está afectando, además de todo el mundo, específicamente a México. Hace 2 días golpeó un huracán calificado 5 en Acapulco, Guerrero. Increíblemente pasó de ser una tormenta tropical, tan solo en 12 horas pasó a ser huracán categoría 5 y ha devastado la ciudad de Acapulco, causando muchísimo daño a la población, generando muchísimo daño económico a toda la infraestructura turística de Acapulco. Ese es un ejemplo de que el cambio climático sí existe y es un ejemplo de que tenemos que tomar medidas serias y ya, en este momento, son necesarias, son medidas indispensablemente rápidas para abordar este problema. Las medidas que ha tomado mi Parlamento para ser un Parlamento verde son las siguientes. Uno, hemos digitalizado todos los documentos. Todo se envía por vías electrónicas para ser compartido a todos los parlamentarios mexicanos. Esa es una parte. La otra, a partir del COVID-19, se aprobaron las sesiones semipresenciales que permiten que los parlamentarios no tengan que trasladarse hasta la Cámara de Diputados o la Cámara de Senadores, hablando específicamente de la Cámara de Diputados. No deben trasladarse, eso hace que haya menos emisiones de carbono y además básicamente permite que el trabajo parlamentario fluya normalmente a través de las sesiones semipresenciales. Y por otro lado, intentando reducir el consumo de agua embotellada, pues la Cámara de Diputados ha implementado bebederos en donde todas las personas tienen acceso al agua y básicamente es eso. Creo que el área de oportunidad donde todavía tenemos que trabajar es en procurar aprobar un presupuesto, un aumento en el presupuesto que ahorita es del 2% solamente para los temas de medio ambiente.
السادة الحضور، على مدار الساعات الماضية كنا أمام سيل غزير من المعارف العميقة التي تتقاطع فيها المساحات بين العمل البرلماني والشأن البيئي، ولكن سلسلة المعرفة لا تنتهي. لذلك أدعو السيد توماس فيتا سيمونز مدير الاتصالات في الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي ليضيء زاوية أخرى في مجال دور برلمانات العالم لاتخاذ إجراءات وسن تشريعات تصب في صالح بيئة الكوكب. أترككم مع كلمة برلماني كوكبي مستقبلنا، فليتفضل مشكورا.
Excellencies, honourable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to give you what I promise will be a very brief update on the IPU's climate campaign, Parliaments for the Planet, which we launched just a few months ago at the 146th IPU Assembly in Bahrain. Parliaments for the Planet is designed to mobilise parliaments and parliamentarians to act on the climate emergency, indeed to go further and faster to act. The call to action of the campaign is very simple. Tell us what you're doing in your parliament for the planet so that we can share that good practice on our global platforms. And I'm happy to report that in the space of only a few months, hundreds of trailblazing MPs, members of parliament, have come forward to share this good climate practice, and the momentum is growing. And you will have seen some of those examples in the videos that we've already shown this morning. So what is the campaign? The main concept of the campaign is that climate action begins at home. And by home, we mean parliaments. Parliaments and those who work in them can show the world, lead by example, not only as individuals, but as institutions. The campaign has two main objectives. Number one, greening parliaments, from brown parliaments to green parliaments. Show us the steps that you're taking to decarbonise, to switch to renewables, to invest in electric vehicles, digitalise your operations. The list goes on. Objective two, the bigger picture, greening the planet. This is beyond the institution of Parliament itself. What examples of great legislation have you passed? How are you holding governments to account on the promises to implement the Paris Agreement, including opposition MPs as well? What role do you have in the global stocktake at this COP28? To quote the head of UNFCCC, Simon Steele, and thanks to the campaign, we have many of them, both big and small, showing how parliaments are stepping up for people and planet. To finish, 3 things you can do to join the campaign. Number 1, download our guide, 10 actions for greener parliaments and those who work in them, available on ipu.org, full of simple steps that you can take. Number 2, use our extensive toolkit, full of assets that you can use on social media. You can record yourself using the branded frame within the context of the overall campaign, Parliaments for the Planet. Number 3, send us a video testimonial, which we're calling My Parliament, My Planet. We already have many MPs who've come forward, as you've seen, telling us how their country is affected by climate change, a snapshot of what's happening, but also a growing compendium of good practice and solutions that parliaments are putting in place. So let me show you just a short compilation of some of those testimonials, which I think can give us reasons to be COP-optimistic. Thank you very much. You got the video?
I'm from the Parliament of India.
Je représente le Parlement français.
I am from Ireland.
From Zimbabwe.
Diputada de México.
Du Canada.
Du Parlement gabonais. I am a member of the New Zealand Parliament.
Iran. In the Schweiz.
In Egypt.
Je suis député du Parlement mauricien. Of the Republic of Fiji Islands.
De l'Assemblée nationale du Sénégal.
From the Kingdom of Tonga. Parlementaire du Tchad.
Representing Finnish Parliament.
The Kingdom of Eswatini.
I am a member of Parliament of Ukraine.
Botswana. Bangladesh.
The Parliament of Uganda.
Suriname. Je représente Madagascar.
Zambia.
Al Parlamento di Uruguay. South Sudan.
Centrafrique.
Sono la vicepresidente della Commissione Esteri della Camera dei Deputati italiana.
we are amongst the most vulnerable when it comes to climate change.
L'impact, il est plutôt à travers le dérèglement climatique.
Serious cyclone issues.
Acidification of the ocean, sea level rising.
ما این سالهای اخیر با یک موضوعی مواجه بودیم به نام گرد و غبار و ریزگرد.
La mer monte chaque année de 2 à 5 cm.
We also have huge issues around car dependency. Ukraine's industry still produced many greenhouse gas emissions.
Con tormentas, lluvias, inundaciones o sequías.
Frost oder auch zu viel Regen, Überschwemmungen.
Le réchauffement est 2 fois plus important que les autres pays de la planète.
We are expecting heat waves, sandstorms.
Le flash flood, comme on dit dans le jargon. Our farming season has changed.
The winters have become warmer.
La stagione sciistica in alcuni luoghi non esiste più.
5 months without rain in a poor country like South Sudan that is still emerging out of war.
Ça détruit les champs, les plantes. The internal migration is happening rapidly.
Over thousands and thousands of people from Turkana in Kenya and also the Pokot from the Kenyan side are now in Uganda looking for livelihoods and also pasture and water for their animals. The climate change is for real.
Les parlementaires ont pu légiférer sur la question à travers des lois sur l'environnement.
It's up to have 51% carbon reduction by 2030.
Éduquer les gens, premièrement, à protéger l'environnement.
Instead of using personal vehicles, we all now just get in single buses and go to where we're going.
By using the e-office suite, we have turned everything into virtual. And by doing that, we have turned paperless. And that's one aspect.
México se comprometió en el Acuerdo de París a tener el 36% de las energías limpias para 2026.
At the global level, Fiji was a past president of COP28.
Nous avons une politique pour combattre l'érosion de nos plages.
Devenir complètement carboneutre d'ici 2050.
We also work with NGOs.
Et puis un ensemble d'éléments qui visent à la fois la partie de la gestion durable de l'eau, l'alimentation saine et durable.
We're looking at planting 1 million trees by 2023, which is this year.
Les plastiques sont interdits maintenant au Sénégal.
We have been able to put half the amount of oil heated houses.
You have protected areas and national parks.
When you do a major project, it has to be environmental friendly.
Parliaments play a key role, as parliaments is where the discussion starts.
Solo con una grande pianificazione, una grande volontà si possono evitare gli effetti peggiori del cambiamento climatico e adattarci strada facendo.
We hope that other parliamentarians around the world will take the same approach.
My parliament,
My planet,
our future.
Mon parlement,
Ma planète,
notre engagement.
notre combat.
Mi parlamento, mi planeta.
Nuestros hijos.
My parliament, my planet, our planet.
Our family.
My parliament,
My planet,
our beautiful blue ocean Pacific.
My parliament,
Mein Planet,
Notre mieux-être.
My parliament,
ma planète,
Our dream.
Notre engagement.
Our life.
Il mio Parlamento
minun planeettani.
Notre devoir.
our environment.
Our people.
Our diversity.
Mon parlement.
My planet.
My parliament,
My planet.
notre devenir.
Bunge langu, sayari yangu.
كل الشكر للسيد توماس فيتز سيمونز مدير الاتصالات في الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي. أما الآن فأدعوكم إلى أخذ فاصل لتناول مأدبة الغداء وأخذ قسط من الراحة على أن يستأنف البرنامج الساعة 2 ظهراً.